Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow to earn tomorrow, you got to learn today. For employment, yes, employment, you must be intelligent. It's essential, very essential to have your credentials. But if you're block-headed like a mule, no one will employ a fool. You'll be the last one to be hired and the first one to be fired. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you gon' catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't follow idle companions or you will get burned. To earn, you got to learn.
Of the Give Back QC Care Charity and the former Minister of Education in Barbados, the Honourable Kay McConney, Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, Dr. David Brown, Principal of Queen's College, Miss Juanita Wade, Principal of Harrison College, Miss Mary Simmons, President of the HCQC Alumni Network Steering Committee, Mr. Carl Applewaite, President of the Queen's College Association and HC Research Team Mentor, Miss Michelle Daniel, Chair of the HCQC Alumni Network's Education for the Future Conference Committee, members of the HCQC Alumni Network Steering Committee, members of the Education for the Future Conference Committee, students and teachers representing Harrison College and Queen's College, other specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. I know it's a little early. I haven't been at school in a long time, but good morning. It's a bit better. My name is Joel Manning, and it's an absolute pleasure this morning to be your master of ceremonies, your host, your speaker, the person that's going to steer for everybody that you've actually come here to listen to. This morning, I'd like to welcome you to the first ever education conference held by the HCQC Alumni Network. This will be 2 exciting days for us to focus on the theme, Education for the Future. Now, just a few housekeeping matters. For those of you present, it is recommended that for all of our safety, you do wear your mask. But if you want to take a little breather in between, just do that. Just don't cough. All in-person attendees are also requested to make sure that your phones are, that's a serious one. Also make sure your phones are muted. For those of you online, your questions will be fielded via the YouTube chat. Now, let's get started. There have been many persons working hard behind the scenes to pull together this conference. And I'd like to take a few minutes for us to hear from some of them. First, I'd like to welcome Miss Michelle Daniel, the chair of the HCQC Alumni Network Conference Committee.
Oh, this is wonderful. Good morning, everyone. I'm a bit more muted than Joelle, but in the interest of time, I will continue. As the first off the bat, I will do the protocol list very quickly, but I'm after as the first speaker, but thereafter, I believe the others can do the protocols having been established. So Dame Billy Miller, patron of the Give Back QC Charity and former Minister of Education in Barbados. The Honourable Kay McConney, Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training. Mrs. Ramona Archer Bradshaw, who is the Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training. Dr. Brown, Dr. David Brown, Principal of Queen's College, Ms. Juanita Wade, the principal of Harrison College, Ms. Mary Simmons, president of the HCQC Alumni Network Steering Committee, Mr. Carl Applewaite, president of the Queen's College Association and HC Research Team Mentor, members of the HCQC Alumni Network Steering Committee, members of the Education for the Future Conference Committee, students and teachers representing Harrison College and Queen's College, and any other teachers from other schools who may be here, members of the public attending in person at the school, all persons who have joined on the virtual platform, especially invited guests, members of the media. My brief comments today are directed at the students. Yes, and not just students of Harrison College and Queen's College, but students across the local landscape, primary, secondary, and tertiary. Also to all the adults at the various stages of our lives, of our journey, personal or professional. There will be something for each of us today. The journey to this conference and to standing here today has not been an easy one. There were changes to the committee, many iterations of the program, differences of opinions, stops and starts, some joy and many frustrations, and stumbling blocks, and the realities of conflicting commitments. Despite all of the foregoing, there was a determination to execute because of the reason it was first conceptualized. In a nutshell, to ensure that you, our students, can grasp the magnitude of all the potential that lies at your fingertips now and in the future, and for you to be ready. That is lesson number one. Keep going if you believe, and find persons who can work with you. Teamwork is essential. That's lesson number one. So today, as we listen to the contributions of the excellent presenters and speakers and participate in Education for the Future, Barbados in the 21st Century and Beyond, there are just a few additional lessons, and hopefully we will learn something. Perseverance. Have you ever failed at something and given up after the first try? Multiply that by 5,126, because that's the number of failed prototypes Sir James Dyson went through over the course of 15 years before creating the eponymous best-selling bagless vacuum cleaner that led to a net worth of $4.5 billion. Do not be deterred or dissuaded. Choice. Realize the power of choice and of being able to combine all kinds of subject areas to realize your personal goals. That was not possible in the true sense of the word 10, 15, or even 20 years ago, and it can only get better. There are many more personal stories that I can share in terms of my life at school, but there's not sufficient time for that. Dream big and aim high. Yes, your idea may sound far-fetched, and there may be naysayers. But if you believe in it, feel passionate that it's something that you must do because it may revolutionize the world, solve a problem, or meet a need, approach it with dogged determination. Possibilities. This is a quote from a gentleman or a lady called Shel Silverstein, and I thought it was apt. Listen to the mustn'ts, child. Listen to the don'ts. Listen to the shouldn'ts, the impossibles, and the won'ts. Listen to the never haves, then listen close to me. Anything can happen, child. Anything can be. Exposure. Push the envelope in terms of your educational dreams. Invest the time to seeking out persons you admire. Read about them. Find ways to meet and interact with them, if possible. And even if you're shy, find ways to suit your personality that will allow you to explore the full potential of all that lies within you, whether in the traditional or non-traditional fields. Fear. Yes, you may be unsure. We may all be unsure. That is natural. By whatever means necessary, be it prayer, talking to a friend, parents, a mentor. If you know and you believe in your heart that this idea, this design, song, prototype is meant to see the light of day, or that you must do that degree in oceanography or aquatic choreography or whatever no one has heard of, find ways to push past that fear and uncertainty, because someday some of you will be educators as well. And so you need to think, what did I not get when I was here that I can do differently for those to come? So as I close, these 2 days have been packaged for varied stakeholders. For you, the students, to really imagine what may lie ahead for you and to be able to grasp fully all that lies ahead in terms of what you can create and unveil to the world, even as educators yourself. For the adults in and out of the educational space, to imagine what could be and create the playing field needed. For the policymakers, current and successive governments, to continue to survey the regional and international landscape to ensure that this country and our children are always poised and ready. For parents and for all adults, in this year 2020, if it's being done, to avoid pigeonholing children and young people and even ourselves until we die. Each one of us has growing to do. We do not know it all, and in each of us, there may be a treasure remaining to be unwrapped. So seize these 2 half days for all that they represent. Listen, participate, and embrace. I thank you.
Definitely some stirring words to kick off our segment today. Thank you very much, Michelle. I now invite the president of the HCQC Alumni Network, Miss Mary Simmons.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols having been duly observed, it is my pleasure to be here and to offer these few remarks on behalf of the steering committee of the Harrison College, Queen's College Alumni Network, comprising representatives of the Alumni Association chapters in Barbados, Canada, and the USA, accompanied by the PTAs and the boards. We are pleased to see this event come to fruition, as this conference has been in gestation for 2 years, delayed by the COVID pandemic. Without the commitment of the two principals and the work of the conference committee, headed by Michelle Daniel, and comprising Laura Nichols of Harrison College, Kathy Daniel of Queen's College, and Rochelle Franklin of Harrison College, and Carl Applewhite, who played a dual role of being a committee member as well as being the teacher who was supervising the research at Harrison College. There are many others, too many to mention, but we must express appreciation to our keynote speakers, the Ministry of Education, the University of Georgia, as well as the panelists and student presenters, and of course, those who contributed generously to our work. Deserving special mention are OSI Computers, Southpaw Graphics, and Career Coach. We thank in particular Dr. Brown for availing the QC facility for both the in-person portion of the conference as well as the focal area for broadcasting the conference and facilitating participation online in Barbados and across the globe. We are truly in the technological age, and we are pleased that we are able to bring this conference to participants worldwide. We look forward to a dynamic interaction over the next 2 days and on this important issue of education for the future. The world is changing rapidly, and we need to prepare our youth and hear from our youth. Today, we will grapple with these challenges and examine the proposals from our youth, as well as hear from policymakers, academics, and practitioners about new directions, as well as lessons learned. We look forward to a dynamic participation in our interactive sessions. Thank you.
Delayed but not denied. Thank you very much, Miss Mary Simmons. Our next speaker started as my deputy principal here at Queen's College and transitioned over to Harrison College to be their principal. Everybody, please welcome Miss Juanita Wade.
Thank you, Joel. I do recognize that the protocol list has already been established, but I really do want to greet everyone, so please permit me. Dame Billy Miller, patron of the Give Back QC charity and former Minister of Education in Barbados. The Honorable Kay McConney, MP, Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training. Chief Education Officer, Dr. Ramona Archer Bradshaw. Dr. David Brown, my mentor, Principal of Queen's College. Ms. Mary Simmons, President of the HCQC Alumni Network Steering Committee. Mr. Carl Applewhite, President of the Queen's College Association, and the Sixth Form Yearhead at Harrison College. Ms. Michelle Daniel, Chair of the HCQC Alumni Network's Education for the Future Conference Committee. Members of the HCQC Alumni Network Steering Committee. Members of the Education for the Future Conference Committee. Students and teachers of Harrison College and Queen's College. Members of the public attending in person and online, and other specially invited guests, members of the media, good morning. It is a pleasure to be here this morning. The mission of Harrison College is to make all of its students self-reliant, curious, thoughtful of others, and capable of using their learning for the good of others in an interdependent world. As we look to the future of education for our young people, my brief remarks this morning will focus on what Harrison College is doing to prepare our students to live in that new world. In order to do this, I will focus on 3 initiatives. First of all, our student exchange. Part of the mission of the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training is to assist in the development of responsible citizens who display positive social behaviors and are disciplined, industrious, creative, and confident, and who can function in a modern society. We believe that this first program gels very well with both the ministry's mission and the mission of Harrison College. We therefore initiated an upper sixth form student exchange program with Campion College, the top performing high school in Jamaica. This initiative was undergirded by the position of Gaia 2015, who posited the idea that having an academic experience abroad contributes to students' personal and academic development while helping them to grow in global and cultural awareness. Increasingly, this is becoming an institutional goal of particular importance in the 21st century. This exchange allowed both the Barbadian and Jamaican students involved to think of a regional or international experience as an essential component of their education. It seeks to impact 4 main areas of student development: academic advances, intercultural sensitivities, personal goals, and professional benefits. The choice of the top performing school in Jamaica demonstrates our desire to expose our staff and students to excellent pedagogy, perhaps different methods, thereby resulting in increased performance by all stakeholders. In addition, the identification of a regional territory provides an opportunity for students' sensibilities to be widened as they're exposed to regional issues which they may have to confront in the future. It is intended that students will become more flexible, creative, and innovative while forging friendships as a result of these initiatives. Our students are looking forward to hosting the Jamaican students at Harrison College in the new year and to the next trip that our students will make in the 2023-2024 school year. The second initiative about which we are excited is the refurbishment of our greenhouse. At Harrison College, our plans for education reform will see a refurbished greenhouse at the center of scientific studies with an emphasis in the future on biotechnology. We have identified mathematics and science as areas of excellence for Harrison College and want to see the students study more of the science related to food production and therefore food security. The COVID-19 pandemic, the war between Russia and Ukraine, and the concomitant food shortages we are experiencing resulting from problems of supply chain have shown us that food security is an area which is critical for our survival. For if we cannot feed our people, no other sophisticated systems will matter. Our students will be exposed to aquaculture, hydroponics, and while we are not yet set up for this last one, we know that there is also scope within our greenhouse for aeroponics. We are set to relaunch the greenhouse early in 2023. We want to be able to add biotechnology and green engineering to the curriculum at Harrison College. Moreover, we want to see scientists remaining in the region to explore the use of local herbs and grasses in the production of teas, local medicines, and pharmaceuticals, which could benefit the region and could impact the world. Wouldn't it be wonderful to find that elusive cure right here on our shores for some of our non-communicable diseases? And thirdly, coding and robotics. We could not look to the future of education without exploring the integration of coding and robotics into other areas of the curriculum. We want to ensure that teachers are trained in the implementation of new technologies as we seek to bridge the gaps left by COVID-19 and to help our students to be ready to construct their places in a post-COVID-19 world. All of our first formers and all of our third formers are being exposed to coding in some form or another. We look forward to the assistance of the HCQC Alumni Network in order to make this desire become a reality where we could finally have our robotics laboratory. Our students continue to work hard on their academic pursuits. Since 2020, the beginning of the COVID period, the school has produced 24 Barbados government scholars and 52 Barbados government exhibitioners. In addition, one student was also awarded the Aubrey Cullimore Scholarship. Staff and students must be commended for their resilience in the face of the adversities of the last 2.5 years. Our students continue to gain places among the top 10 performers in the region and must be applauded for these performances, given the circumstances. Most of them go on to the 3 campuses of the University of the West Indies or venture further afield to universities across the globe. We have attempted to return to some sense of normalcy, including our participation in the traditional sports of basketball, cricket, athletics, football, and volleyball, and most recently into school swim sports, where we emerged as champions in both the boys and girls competition. But we are cognizant that the world will never be quite the same. We will therefore take the lessons learned as we adopt and adapt while not compromising the quality of the education which we offer. We will continue to prepare our students for the future to be the well-rounded global citizens who will go on to impact their world. In 2023, Harrison College will be celebrating 290 years as a leading educational institution in the region. This has not been an easy path, but with God's help, we will continue to look to the future with optimism and enthusiasm. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wade. The next gentleman to straight to this platform, we had a very good relationship at school, simply because of how many times he had to call me into his office to deliver stern words. Everybody please welcome Dr. David Brown, a principal of Queen's College.
Protocol being established, I want to seize the opportunity to welcome the principal and staff and students of Harrison College to Queen's College. I look forward to this conference today. The conference has come along at a very critical time in the history of Barbados. 2 years after the devastation of pandemic, COVID-19, but it has exposed the frailties of our society, economy, and our educational system. In our economy, we realize that we can no longer put all our eggs in the tourism basket. That is very clear to us. We are toying in Barbados with the idea that we are going to transform our economy and we are going to become a biotech island. I want to say to the principal of Queen's College, we have a greenhouse in mind and cosmetology, and we are going to take that to a different level. So I am there with you, running with you. In terms of our society, it appears as though it is degenerating into a lawless societies spearheaded by the youth. Our educational system has been disrupted. The central theme for this conference this morning is about education in the future. I'm looking forward to hearing from the young people of Harrison College and Queen's College what the future in education should be like. Are we going to educate for the moral imperative? Are we going to prepare special worker for the workforce? In this small island, we have been toying with the idea that I heard the Prime Minister talk about a few days ago. Barbados is the most easterly of the Caribbean islands. What is the advantage to Barbados of being the most easterly Caribbean island? Jamaica is close to the United States. They're hosting more than 3 million tourists so far. I visited the Bahamas in 2017, and as the plane was landing, I saw what the Bahamas was all about. The number of private jets there on the tarmac. It is close to the United States. What is the advantage for us? Now, I've had the opportunity to witness and to see our group give their presentation. Believe you me, it is exciting. I know Harrison College is going to produce a very exciting presentation, and we are going to have conference with a lot to think about. So as far as I'm concerned, let this conference start. I want to hear the youngsters. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again to Queen's College.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown. Now, on behalf of the Ministry to deliver remarks, I now invite the Honourable Kay McConney, Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training.
Further looks, I greet you as an alumna of Queen's College, 1984. And as we open minds to the future and we build bridges through education, I want to wish you a very meaningful conference. And I want to start by bidding you a very good morning. Dame Billy Miller, my mentor, a lady who has inspired me from the time I knew who you were, a former Minister of Education on whose shoulders I now stand. I wanted especially to greet you this morning. I also wish to greet the principals of both Harrison's and Queen's College, as well as the leaders of those organizations that have helped to bring this conference to fruition. And to all of you, I say thank you. And I start here this morning, and I start slowly, because the world is moving at a pace where sometimes just to think, we need to slow down. And my most important greeting this morning is to you, the students, who will make this conference meaningful. I will not speak very long this morning. There are two things that I want to share that will help to frame how I hope you will continue to develop your themes and have your discussions throughout this conference today. We often think of transforming education as if it were only a system that we were seeking to transform. But more importantly, we need to think about transformative education. that goes beyond the system and actually impacts the lives of every single one of you in here. And as such, I want, as you make your deliberations over the period of this conference, to start with who is the ideal person we need to produce through education in order to face the environment into which you will now enter. What's the person? What's the kind of student we need to produce? And I want to share with you that the heads of governments of CARICOM already started to think about this. What is the ideal Caribbean person we need to produce in order to live better lives, in order to move the region forward, in order to be what Barbados is seeking to produce, which is global citizens with Bajan roots and a Caribbean consciousness. What are we seeking to produce? Global citizens with Bajan roots and a Caribbean consciousness. And with your permission, do I have your permission to share with you some of the thoughts of the heads of government? I do. The heads of government, they thought that the kind of persons you all need to become and the kinds of persons our education system and our entire Caribbean civilization needs to be producing at this time are these. And it's a list, but I don't want you to memorize the list. I want you to appreciate each aspect and see yourself in it. The ideal Caribbean person has respect for human life, on which all other values must rest. That was number one. Sees ethnic, religious, and other diversity as a source of potential strength and richness. I don't want you to take notes. I see someone taking notes. I just want you to listen. Don't memorize it. Don't take notes. Simply see yourself in it. The ideal Caribbean person is aware of the importance of living in harmony with the environment. The ideal Caribbean person has a strong appreciation of family and kinship values and community cohesion and a moral responsibility for and accountability to self and community. That ideal Caribbean person has an informed respect for our cultural heritage. And here is one thing that really resonates even as we start to contemplate reform in this country of the system itself. That ideal Caribbean person demonstrates multiple literacies. As many of you know, there are multiple intelligences. Our children learn differently and they are good at different things. Our system has been a system that has relied on academics and academics in a way that sometimes we need also to make sure that there is an emphasis on other things such as social and emotional learning, technical and vocational training. And that's why I'm happy to hear Principals Brown and Principals Wade speak of cosmetology, which is part of that technical and vocational side, and speak of agriculture and agricultural side, which in fact not only speaks to the academics of things, but also not only what our students will know, but what is it they can do at the end of their time. It speaks of not only demonstrating multiple literacies and intelligences, but independent and critical thinking. Where those of you here will question, we want you to question the beliefs and the practices of the past and of the present, and to bring this to bear on your innovative application in science, technology, and problem solving in all areas of education. We want you to demonstrate a positive work ethic, to value creative imagination. We want you to have the capacity to create and take advantage of opportunities and to maintain your physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being. We want you to nourish in yourself without any prejudice to gender. We want you to develop yourself to your full potential. And finally, we want to make sure that you are the kind of ideal Caribbean person who really respects the differences and the similarities between male and females and see this as a mutual strength. It was a lot for me to share, and as I said, I didn't want you to memorize it. But understand that what we are trying to create in the future of education is not just those persons who have passed exams, not just those persons who are defined by scores and the A's and the B's and the scholarships and the exhibitions, but we really want to create a whole person, and the future of education requires that we make certain shifts. And I say to you, it is time for a shift. Why is it time for a shift? Because of the environment we live in. I will not repeat much of some of what you've heard this morning about the environment you live in. You're living in it. You know exactly what environment you're living in. And I am sure that if I asked many of you, and especially many of the people, your teachers and the ones sitting directly here to my left, how has the world changed in the last 10 years, the last 20 years, the last 40 years, the last 200 years, or the last 130-something years of Harrisons and Queens? You would all say the world has changed. Yet still the system that the education system we are in now, it is dated and it was suited for a different time. It has served us well. It has produced many of the people you see here, and you have many stars that you have celebrated over the years. Understand, though, that the world has changed and it is not changing back. And to continue to use a system that no longer serves the future is putting a noose around our neck as a country and as a region. So what is the world in which our young people must live and create a livelihood? It takes, at this time, a whole system approach. And we must set our young people up to meet the imperatives of the time, to cater to their interests, which is also their dreams and their goals, and to look out for their well-being. And when I speak of imperatives and interests and well-being, I refer not only to those of our students and the young persons in this room and across Barbados, but I'm also speaking about the imperatives and the interests of our teachers and of our school leaders and of our parents and of all partners in education. This is a whole of system approach. And it is a whole of system approach that must be tailored and purpose-built for the digital revolution, the digital age in which we are now living. I think we have long respected the transformative power of education. And we now have in our hands the opportunity for us to move forward in a very meaningful way. Tell me, can you relate to these? As I call them, tell me if this is the reality you are facing. We are at a time when you, all of our students here, must be able to cope with change that's coming faster than it has ever come in our lifetimes, and perhaps the slowest it will ever be again. Are you experiencing that? Are you experiencing that? You're allowed to answer back. Are you experiencing the fact that we are at a time when our systems must cope with disorientation that is created by our ongoing technological disruption, and that we have to rebalance at every level? Are you experiencing that disruption and that disorientation? Yes, you are. Are we at a time when we are experiencing economic turmoil and crisis? And have you been hearing what the economists around the world are saying? They're saying that this is perhaps, the coming years will perhaps be the worst that we have seen since the Depression of the 1920s. Are you feeling the pinch? And I'm going to ask you, are you also experiencing failing trust? Fake news, people around you, government, teachers. Are you experiencing falling trust? Yes. Guess what? The Human Development Report of the United Nations Development Program is telling us that global trust is perhaps at its lowest in recent times. And we are asking you, our children, to find pathways to live and to learn and to create livelihoods while navigating all this, but also while trying to secure our food and while trying to save the planet from climate change that you did not create. Are you experiencing this? We are asking you to do a lot, but we too must do our jobs as government, as parents, as schools, as an entire community to help set you up for success so that you are able to face this environment and go out there as active players, not just to participate, but to win. Now, I could go on, but I will not. But I want to share with you the confidence that I have in this generation of young people we have in schools and the emerging generations to do what needs to be done. How many of you may have heard of the Game Changers Innovation Awards? This is where a number of young people were brought together to create technology-enabled solutions to a number of the problems that we're facing here in this system. And I want to share with you that there was a competition, and you may remember the Pride of Barbados video game that was developed in response to this Game Changers Innovation Awards. There was also the Quick Orders. It is an app that makes the process of ordering from the canteen more efficient. Our students did this, and you continue to innovate and use technology to help you navigate this new world in which you live. And I want to say, continue to blaze trails like that in innovation. There are many solutions we need for around our school campuses. It is important that you know that you have the capacity not only to innovate for your immediate surroundings, but for the economic development and to solve other problems that are there. Education leaders, I am so pleased to hear the work that you are doing on your various campuses. And I know it's not just the two school leaders here, but there are school leaders across Barbados who are introducing new ideas and different approaches within your schools to ensure that you are able to set the students over whom you have charge for success. The future of work has already arrived. The future of work has already arrived. And students, the future of school is already here. The world has changed, it's not changing back. You will never again have only face-to-face. There will always be a hybrid component to the things that you do. Technology will always be a part of the future going forward, however we choose to integrate it. And the difference that has to be made is going to be made by you. And while it is true that my government has prioritized education reform, and I'll tell you a little bit more about education reform at this stage, but basically we have said that the conversations we've been having with our unions, with our teachers, with our various associations, with our principals as well, that when we get ready to go to the public for public consultation on education reform, we will have our consultations, that we want to carry all of those partners with us. And so today I am not going to get into the details of education reform, but I will share with you that it is important that you recognize that it is not the government that will implement education reform. It is the schools, and it is the teachers, and it is the parents, and it is the unions, and it is all of our partners who will need to be a part of this. And as I close, I want to remind you that this is not a time for us to wince from the challenges that are ahead of us. It is a time for us to step boldly into the unknown. And when I say step boldly, I don't mean step blindly either. But I think that we have to recognize that the best of education is ahead of us. It is not behind us. And on that note, I thank you and I encourage you to help us to see how the best of education can be ahead of us with your help and your voice. Thank you.
Certainly deep and stirring words. Global citizens with Bajan roots and a Caribbean consciousness. Thank you very much, Minister McConney. If you have a bag in the rain, please go and grab it. Wet books don't read well. Thanks. Yeah, don't forget your bags outside. You might want to grab them. Given that we have an online audience, we're going to move our show along. And as Dr. Brown said, let's get started. I really wanted to say let's get rumbling though. But getting our ball rumbling now will be the first presentation for the students of Harrison College. Their presentation will be on the topic, financial literacy in education. I wasn't looking for the clap just yet, but please join me in welcoming students Sydney Ford, Zenobia Storm Husbands, Giovanni Gittins, Emmanuel Seeley, and Jordan Gregg.
Dame Billy Miller, former government minister and patron of the QC Give Back charity, the Honorable Kay McConney, Minister of Education, Technological and Vocational Training, Dr. Ramona Archer Bradshaw, Chief Education Officer, Principals of Harrison College and Queen's College, Ms. Juanita Wade, and Dr. David Brown, Ms. Maylee Simmons, President of the HCQC Alumni Network Steering Committee, Ms. Michelle Daniel, President of the HCQC Alumni Network Education Conference Committee, teachers, parents, stakeholders, fellow students, good morning. Our presentation is on the topic of financial literacy, specifically on its role in modern societies and how it should be implemented into school curriculums to better prepare young persons for the real world. Now, to begin the presentation, some terminology must be defined. The Oxford-Cambridge Dictionary defines financial literacy as the ability to understand basic principles of business and finance. This includes, but is not limited to, things like budgeting, debt management, credit, taxes, and theft protection. In addition to this, a 2013 paper by Bichetti defines financial literacy as the process by which financial consumers or investors improve their understanding of financial products, concepts, and risks through information, instruction, and/or objective advice, develop the skills and confidence to become more aware of financial risks and opportunities, to make informed choices, to know where to go for help, and to take other effective actions to improve their financial well-being. We will be using this definition for the remainder of the presentation. Furthermore, to understand financial literacy, we must first understand wealth. Wealth is defined as the abundance of valuable materials, possessions, or resources. This idea of wealth is crucial to the idea of financial literacy, as financial literacy is used as a tool to safeguard or build said wealth for greater personal or financial security and greater quality of life. It must also be understood, however, that wealth may be inherited in the form of generational wealth. This being assets passed down by one generation of a family to another, including family businesses, stocks, bonds, real estate, etc. This sort of wealth requires different specific financial skills, such as property management, taxes, investment, and business management. Someone that is not wealthy may not require these specific financial skills. However, the key building blocks of financial literacy translate across all areas and all socioeconomic classes. These base concepts consist of 5 main pillars of understanding on which all the idea of financial literacy is built. These pillars being, first, earning; second, interest; third, protection; fourth, spending; and 5, borrowing. As you can see there on the screen. By a show of hands, how many people in here have a competent understanding of all 5 of these pillars? So I see very few hands. So I'll just break those down quickly for you all. Earning, which then deals with, sorry, one second. Deals with the understanding of salaries and benefits to make the most out of what you earn and take advantage of your workplace benefits to better yourself. Saving and investing, which covers aspects of learning to save for things like retirement, a house, and other significant investments, as well as learning about how to invest wisely and manage risk to generate additional income and build wealth. Protection, which involves learning steps to safeguard yourself in case of an unexpected emergency, such as accumulating an emergency saving fund, and attaining the necessary insurance or insurances, especially in a hurricane-prone island such as Barbados. Spending, which deals with gaining the skills to be able to decipher what is good value for specific purchases and learning how to compare and contrast to make wise financial decisions, learning what is a need versus what is a want. Borrowing, which is the final pillar and involves concepts such as that borrowing money enables essential purchases like going to college or buying a home. So now that you have the basic understanding of the concepts involved, what is the main problem with the financial literacy level today? And what problems arise from the current financial literacy standard?
Well, economic theory labels everyone as a consumer. That is, someone who purchases goods and services to satisfy their needs and wants. Consumers with low financial literacy, therefore, may be incapable of budgeting and buying goods and services which meet their needs. According to Lasardi and Tufano, they may also find difficulty comprehending financial concepts, such as interest, which can result in increased spending, large debt burdens, and higher interest rates. The report on Standard & Poor's Global Financial Literacy Survey found that only 33% of adults worldwide are financially literate. But what does that mean? that 3.5 billion adults globally lack an understanding of the crucial financial concepts. The report on the S&P survey highlighted the increased use of credit as well. However, knowledge of interest does not see the same rise. This reinforces the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, or ACIC's, report, which stated that financial literacy is volatile as technology advances and more persons are expected to manage their own finances. Financial literacy also affects women more than men. The survey found that 35% of men are financially literate compared to 30% of women, leading to problems such as high debt, especially student loans, taking into consideration that women are more likely to graduate from college, difficulty managing income, and a lack of knowledge regarding investment and taxes. Annuity.org also gives stats on divorce and finances. 1 in 5 women fall into poverty due to divorce, and 3 in 4 divorced mothers don't receive full payment of their child support. 1 in 3 women lose their homes after divorce. This then would correspond to financial dependency. Female consumers who are financially illiterate will likely depend on their spouses, leading to financial abuse. And if a situation is physically abusive, these women would not have the means to leave. Well, the results of the survey: Denmark, Norway, and Sweden tied for first place with a 71% literacy rate according to S&P. These countries also subsequently have low crime and poverty rates, with poverty in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden in 2017 ranking 0.2, 0.5, and 0.5 respectively, while crime was at 1.24 in Denmark, 0.53 in Norway, and 1.14 in Sweden, also in 2017. It is also important to note that these crimes were typically property crimes, such as theft and burglary, rather than the violent crimes such as homicide. But the effects of financial literacy is not a concept that is confined to the northern countries. It happens right here in our Caribbean home. Unfortunately, Jamaica was the only country to participate in this 2014 survey, getting 33%. This is 53.5% lower than the top 3 countries. The percentage of Jamaicans who live below the poverty line is 19.3, while the crime rate is extremely high at 56.39. Right in our very own Barbados, we can see perpetual consequences of low financial literacy. Take the recent NIS crisis, for example. Derek Osborne, an actuarial scientist, reports that COVID-19 caused Barbadians to save less and to spend more, tapping into their savings. Eventually, these withdrawals will leave the NIS empty. And what does that mean for our pensioners, those who accept sums of money from the government due to them no longer working after reaching the retirement age of 67? Osborne estimates a complete crisis in 12 to 15 years if adequate measures are not taken to correct the issue. Except in 12 to 15 years, it will be me and my peers who will have to find a solution to these problems. So how do we prepare the leaders of tomorrow to better manage their money and save for their future in order to become better regional and global citizens? Well, we teach it.
To illustrate, the story we hear all the time is of a young person thrown out into the world without real financial knowledge, where they're taken advantage of and find themselves tied to an unfavorable student loan agreement. The objective of financial education is to combat situations like this, the recent consequences of the credit crisis, consumer over-indebtedness, and bankruptcy, by providing consumers with a means to make better financial decisions. This education can empower individuals and allow them to better manage personal or household finances and resources, as well as enabling them to defend their rights as financial consumers. Moreover, financially literate citizens will have a greater capacity to understand economic and social policies adopted within their economies. The overarching goal of education is to give students the skills needed to make a living and, by and large, creating an effective workforce for the country. But contradictingly, there's a deficit of financial education in schools. Younger years are vital for forming permanent values, and thus children who have not been exposed to financial literacy concepts at an early age grow up into adults who do not have a strong grasp on financial literacy. They then become parents, bosses, or teachers to the next generation of children, continuing the cycle. The lack of extensive financial literacy education is a waste of opportunity, and the theory matches the results. As we can see in Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, what they all have in common is their implementation of financial literacy education, with Denmark making it compulsory from grades 7 through 9, Norway having it for students aged 6 to 15, and Sweden having it mandatory from first grade, then throughout high school. Next, we can look at our own country. The IDB measures financial literacy in Barbados by a telephone survey. This survey utilizes 3 questions which encompass the fundamental concepts of financial literacy. The IDB survey finds that financial literacy is correlated to greater ability to withstand financial hardship. Among respondents who lost their jobs during the pandemic, those who could still meet their basic needs presented an average score on the Financial Literacy Index of 1.80 compared to the 1.32 for those who could not meet their basic needs. Even among those who did not lose their income, there was a positive link between financial literacy and capacity to endure. When confronted with a hypothetical question on their ability to survive a month if their household lost its main source of income, those who replied positively scored on average 1.91 compared to those who scored 1.46 who did not have the resources to cope with the shock for a month. Well, evidence would suggest it's a net gain to implement financial literacy in our education, but what could it look like?
Good morning, everybody. Please look at the person closest to you. I want you to ask them, do you like money? Wow. Based on your response, I think we can all agree that the answer will be yes. So then that begs the question, what is being done to make sure that all of us can keep that money in the future? Where and how is financial literacy education implemented in the world? Well, internationally, schools have implemented courses in financial literacy. Also, there have been after-school programs implemented. A good example of that would be the United States of America, where 21 states have made it mandatory that all their students be taught financial literacy in class. Additionally, 4 states have mandated that their students be given the opportunity to, be given the opportunity to learn financial literacy. That is, that the courses are. Thank you. Seems everything is opposed to financial literacy, but we can work through that together. So what does financial literacy education look like in Barbados? Well, financial literacy education have been made available through initiatives like the National Training Initiative in cooperation with Coursera and the $20 Challenge, both of which provide the opportunity for students to learn financial literacy, whether it be in a formal setting or through experience in the case of the $20 Challenge. So then that begs the question, is the current structure for financial literacy education in Barbados working? Well, by the raising of hands, please indicate to me who here has done any of the courses in financial literacy. Okay, I think that proves the point. Financial literacy education in Barbados is not sufficient. So then we must evaluate how financial literacy education internationally is working. Right. So there are two advantages for financial literacy education in that financial literacy correlates with good financial decisions. That is, persons who have good financial literacy tend to make better decisions with their money in the future. So by putting it in schools, we make it that in the future, we can make good decisions. And then the other advantage is that financial literacy education is easy to access if it is put in schools. I can simply go to school and I will learn it. So for all school students, it is accessible. However, financial literacy is difficult to measure. Unlike health literacy, which has standardized testing, financial literacy tests often are unstandardized. Furthermore, the tests often test financial education. For example, the SMP test that my colleague Synovia Starm would have mentioned ask questions such as, if you had $100 and you put it in a bank account and that $100 increases 10% annually, how much money will you get after a year? That is a question on education. That is a question on whether or not I know math. And unfortunately, I would have to say, not really, because Truth be told, when I answered this question the first time, I said $90. I don't know how that happened, but so be it. And although financial education does have a positive impact on financial literacy, we cannot see it as one and the same. That being said, what approach should we make and where do we go from here?
To start, I will echo the ASIC in saying that while I would not argue that schools should have sole responsibility for developing students' financial literacy, I certainly see them as having an important role to play. Financial literacy is key to nurturing an effective global citizen and giving access to opportunities, goods and services, and overall development, whether it be personal or national. This being said, two prospective frameworks will be explored in our presentation today. The first is teaching financial literacy as an individual subject with its own resources, such as a syllabus and form of assessment, and the other being integrating financial literacy with other subject syllabi. I will be expanding on the prior framework, while my colleague Giovanni will be expanding on the latter. I believe that to combat this problem efficiently, we need a curriculum framework where financial literacy is taught as an individual subject. With the presence of environmental circumstances like COVID, the dilemma of too much to teach and too little time is all too real in schools. Therefore, adding more to the amount of coursework that to be taught in a specific subject may be impractical if not done properly. Additionally, it is scientifically proven that the brain's capacity to learn new ideas continually shrinks as you age. Therefore, I believe it is prudent to start learning how to manage financial matters early when entering secondary school, as prerequisites such as addition, multiplication, subtraction, division, comprehension, and counting should have been grasped before the completion of primary school. The envisioned syllabus will utilize this knowledge to help students to understand the intricacies of content and problems rooted in areas of budgeting, debt management, credit, taxes, theft and scam protection, investment, and loans through various projects based on the material learned and traditional examinations. One such example of this project-based learning referenced above would be a budgeting exercise where each student is given $5, which they need to manage throughout an entire week. The syllabus should range from how students can be financially conscious at their current stage of life to how they can manage money effectively well into their career, with the intensity and relevance of the program increasing as the year level progresses. For example, a focus on budgeting could be implemented in the first form as they're being introduced to the topic of financial literacy, while a focus on loans and investment in the sixth form as they are about to transition into university and the world of work. Some key things to note, however, about this framework are, firstly, to implement anything of this magnitude, government and external funding is paramount. Secondly, teachers will need to be trained to effectively teach and assess information tied to financial literacy. I do acknowledge that this is the harder approach to take and will need to be fully crafted from ground zero. However, I say that we take the bull by the horns and put the necessary work in to implement this type of approach now to ensure that nationally and regionally we are doing what we need to inform the generations to come on financial literacy. And now to the second framework.
Good morning again. Based on my research, I would suggest that financial literacy be integrated into other subjects. With the apparent lack of standardization regarding testing tools for financial literacy and the reported ill effects of mandatory financial literacy classes, it would be unwise to mandate such courses in school. Not only would it be difficult to measure the rates of financial literacy in a school setting, but it may actually disrupt other mandatory subjects such as math and English. The 2022 Transforming Education Summit in Barbados details that teachers report pressure in completing the current syllabi. However, there is so little room for flexibility in the syllabus that, pardon me, there's so little room for flexibility in the syllabus, that government-funded after-school programs had to be considered. This begs the question, where will we put this extra cost? Now, I have a question for all these students here, but how many of you think honestly that you can take an extra subject right now? You feel that that would not be a major pressure on you? Anybody? Right, so we're all in agreement that we're all in agreement that we have a lot to do, or in other words, we got real enough work, right? And then the problem, right, and also with the introduction of a new class, the curriculum becomes more densely packed. So then how will we teach the other subjects? Where will we find the time to make sure that we properly teach our children about the French, about the math, things that we're already struggling with? Furthermore, the Transforming Education Summit report also highlights that there is not enough money to support the current development of the educational system. Therefore, the financial resources required to train teachers and implement the subject into Barbadian schools may become depleted. We simply do not have the financial assets to implement financial literacy as a subject right now. However, in accordance with the World Bank Group's 2017 study, integration of financial literacy into other subjects would allow syllabi to remain virtually the same in quantity. What if, for example, for a French group project, instead of researching a recipe for pain au chocolat, students were asked to buy ingredients and to make it on a budget? This would negate the overarching concern of pressure to complete subject syllabi, as well as in decreasing the likelihood of students rejecting or not retaining information taught. It also opens the opportunity for constant reinforcement of teachings as students encounter them in every class. Like mandatory classes, this framework should also allow students to learn topics in the syllabus, hence allowing students to be prepared for the future regarding financial literacy. Project-based learning, as my colleague Emmanuel suggested, and I highlighted in the example of making croissants, is a method that can be used in order to prepare the next generation. A possible difficulty, however, is the creation of such syllabus, as well as the integration. That being said, what can we take away from this presentation?
Well, to conclude, financial literacy in the modern day is not only a beneficial tool to be used to create personal financial security, but is also a necessity to be able to survive in the economical climates of today. Equipping the next generation with these crucial skills is beneficial not only to their future alone, but to the future of the country as a whole. We are able to look at examples such as Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, who have successfully shaped their young generations to be financially literate through education, and take inspiration to believe that we too can one day achieve that level of competence. On top of that, as both my colleagues Emmanuel and Giovanni have said, there are many numerous ways to implement the solution to this problem, and allows government flexibility in many numerous ways to tackle the issue. So, what are we waiting for? Are we going to let yet another generation grow up to only succumb to immense debt? Will we raise another generation of women, some of whom do not possess the basic concepts of finances or money? Or will we strive to implement and innovate, to create a generation that lives responsibly and comfortably, and one that has the tools to create a better Barbados and a better world? Thank you. We are also taking questions.
Thank you very much, Harrison College. Thought-provoking. I would like a croissant right about now. I now invite our moderator for the question and answer segment. It is Mr. David Simpson.
Good morning, everyone. I will explain the grin on my face shortly, but I want to say how happy I am to be back in this place, Queen's College. This is my alma mater. I left in, should I say this? Anyway, I left in 1993. I must say that why is Carl opening his eyes? You left probably a year after. Anyway, I left in 1993. I only spent 3 years here because the old Queen's College, as many of you may not know, is now the office of the Ministry of Education on Constitution Road, where I spent the first 4 years of my Queen's College education. So it is good to be back here. I'm also pleased to see the ongoing twinning between Harrison College and Queen's College because it started back then with certain classes being conducted in science and maths, I believe, on occasion across at Harrison College, and there was art with Harrison College students coming across to QC and so on. So I'm happy to see that today we are continuing. When I say today, not just today, but this year and in the past few years, continuing that joining or twinning. Ladies and gentlemen, I must ask you once again to give these young people another round of applause. And I am going to come to your Q&A, but of necessity, I must make a few comments following that presentation. What many of you may not know is that I am a consultant with the Ministry of Energy and Business Development, and my core responsibility is to advise the ministry and lead its financial literacy initiative. And what these young people have just presented in two parts, one makes up the introduction to financial literacy that I present, and secondly, a body of research that I had to go through between 2018 and 2020 to get the initiative off the ground. I must also share that where we go in terms of the schools is already on the discussion, but COVID was a delay. We took a decision even after having, Minister McConney may not even be fully aware, but we had consultations with the ministry, and we decided with the advent of COVID that we did not want to place that additional burden for many of the reasons that you outlined in your research on the students and the teachers during that COVID period. But I do want to say this morning that Principal Wade and Carl, I will be reaching out to you because I want to use this panel of young people here to do one or two presentations for us under the Financial Literacy Bureau. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Michelle and Mary have been waiting all week for an abstract recording from myself on financial literacy. I was unable to do so based on my busy schedule and came here today prepared to do it orally. But these young people have essentially presented what I intended to present. So Minister McConney and Dr. Bradshaw, you will be hearing from me quite soon because I think I see an avenue where very quickly we can start our interventions into the schools in terms of financial literacy. Now, a lot was said, and I want to go ahead and field some questions from you in the audience and to get some responses, especially to the proposed approaches of the panel on financial literacy. So do we have any takers, any questions, any comments? Yes, I see one microphone in the center, so please feel free to come across to the mic and let's have your question or comment.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I recently saw that CSC has a subject in CAPE called Financial Studies. So I was wondering, what is your opinion on making it an option or an option besides Communication Studies or Caribbean Studies in sixth form in Barbados?
Personally, I support that. As the panel said, we need to find ways to intertwine financial literacy, not just as a core subject, but across all subjects that students are taking. In terms of examination, having a core exam is a good thing, but again, where we get the syllabus intertwined and the content intertwined into each subject that you're doing in school, it will then manifest itself in every exam as relevant to that particular topic. Any comment from the panel on that in terms of making the financial studies paper more than an option?
Okay. Hello, listen.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Hi. So I know I didn't speak on mandating financial literacy in schools and making it mandatory, but I do echo that it should be an option because really we're all teenagers and we're all very dynamic people who are constantly changing. And so I feel like to tell somebody that you have to do this will sort of make them resist it and to put in plain terms, just not want to. But I do feel as though it should be a more accessible option for the students who are interested in it and who would like to pursue careers in business or in finance. Yeah, anybody?
I was also just going to add that I also agree with what my colleague Storm said, but I think there's also definitely benefit within the syllabus of that CAPE exam and be able to look and see what CAPE thinks. Oh, my apologies. We look and see what CSEC thinks would be an appropriate level for that age group and specifically for a region, because a lot of the studies done obviously are for the US and are for Europe. However, we need to look at the Caribbean and see how we can get that up and running here.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
Just a comment about the financial services syllabus. It's deep, and we go into financial markets. So it goes way past financial literacy. And then the Caribbean studies, you need that core because at university, you've got a set of core subjects that you really need to do. So it's going to be hard for CSC to say it is an option. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you for that. I think one of the other avenues that the panel mentioned was using after school and other activities to support so that everything doesn't have to be in classroom learning. The important thing here is that, as they made the point in their research, is that financial literacy is a necessary life skill, and we have to find ways to do that. And they did mention the work of the $20 Challenge in schools, which is a program of the Barbados Entrepreneurship Foundation. And there are other programs in school and so on meant to work in conjunction with financial literacy. Principal Wade spoke about the greenhouse. Principal Brown spoke about cosmetology and so on. And what we need to understand in terms of financial literacy, just understanding the role of that greenhouse in terms of creating income, diversifying income, and so on, are aspects of financial literacy. Understanding how you may be able to take that greenhouse project at Harrison College and start a small one in your backyard or on a plot of family land, and how that can save money for the family or create income for the family for generations to come. You spoke about aquaponics, I think, and so on. How can these things help us to create generational income and wealth, as you spoke of in the definition of financial literacy? So it's not limited to how to budget, how to spend money. And you use the 5 pillars, which I used in my presentation as well. And on the earning, one of the things there is not just managing your current income, but how can you diversify and create multiple sources of income for your household? And that is a core competence within in terms of becoming financially literate. We have another question.
Good morning. I have 2 questions for you, actually, one from myself and one from my colleagues, and they're using me as a spokesperson. My first question would be, the Harzonians mentioned early in their presentation that there was a difficulty of implementing the financial literacy into our courses because it would add to the bulk of the syllabus that we have already. What are your opinions on having it, because they mentioned it would be a benefit if it was early early on implementing it and integrating it with the HFLE syllabus, seeing as at QC, I know that HFLE is mandatory from first to third form. And I believe at HC, it's mandatory up until fifth, if I'm correct. Seeing as that's kind of a subject, okay, we talk about purity, we talk about colleges, why can't we talk about financial literacy as well?
My view and advice to the ministry has been similar to the researches of the panel, and that is we need to intertwine financial literacy into each topic. When I was at QC, we did home economics. There is a financial component in that. When you do science, there's a financial component in that. There's a financial component in Caribbean studies and social studies. And essentially, if you go back to the definition that was given, you are looking at how you can develop skills and abilities to make better business and household decisions when it comes to money. So understanding the economics of cooking or science, you are now better aware how to make things last longer, how to stretch your dollar, how to budget for shopping, etc. Those are the type of decisions that you want to make. So I support the view that we should not have another dedicated subject to financial literacy, because what that also does is kind of creates a compartment where we park it and it doesn't become the life skill that we need it to become. So this will be the topic of a lot of analysis and further discussion with the ministry and the teachers, of course, and with yourselves as students. But I support the notion where we intertwine it across the syllabi of all the other papers that and subjects you're doing. Part 2 to your question was, and then we'll make that the last one.
Okay, some of my colleagues wanted to know what are the factors that lead to women not having the same level of understanding of financial literacy as men?
I think that is linked to access to education as well, and also access to certain types of jobs. So it's lack of exposure and lack of education in many cases. One of the initiatives under the financial literacy program that I'm currently looking at is working with a young lady whose focus is financial literacy for females and for disadvantaged women. And that is something that we will be launching in the new year. But it is a societal issue in terms of access to these things by women. Women historically became homemakers and providers and looking after children. That came first. It kept them from the world of work in some instances. And naturally, the same opportunities have not been available. So that's where it starts. But I believe we have the opportunity now with you sitting here as students to make sure that that playing field is leveled in terms of the knowledge, which then gives you access to better opportunities as females, but as young people generally.
Thank you.
So I want to thank you all for the questions. I know this is a topic that we could speak about for the rest of the day. And again, I really want to thank our panel for the research they did on this topic. I think it has provided myself as a consultant to the ministry with some thoughts in terms of how we could get our program into the schools. And I thank you all. I think I have one last comment from the panel and then 2 last comments, and then we'll pass back to our MC.
Okay, hi again. I presented partially on financial literacy in women. And what I think is important to know is that the survey that I referenced was global. And many of it did not take like I said, Jamaica was the only country that participated. So places like Barbados, we don't have data from Standard & Poor's survey. However, I know specifically, like places like Afghanistan came in at 14. And I can't do the math right now, but I know that's significantly smaller than 71% in the top 3 countries. And so I do feel that as though culture and different places in the world would obviously have different views on it. However, I know that at Harrison College specifically, statistically, the girls have been outranking the boys. It's a win in my opinion, but you know. And so I do feel as if it is sort of cultural and that it can be defined by where you live and what the people around you are saying.
This one.
Okay. To the HFLE point, that was actually that was in our initial planning to in Giovanni's point to reference HFLE, but I think we kind of came to the consensus that there's a broad spectrum that home and family life education can cover. So since we have established such a need for financial literacy, I feel like um, implementing it into different courses is better than just pigeonholing it into HFLE, especially since I know at our school, for me, HFLE was always kind of a free period from like first to third form. And I think most of us can relate to that. But certainly coming back in sixth form, now we've gone through university prep, we've gone through introspection, learning yourself. So there is a very vast amount of information that we are covering in HFLE. So to add on something as big and as pivotal as and key as financial literacy only in HFLE, we believe that if we were to take the approach to implement it in courses, we would diversify it. And as Giovanni would have said, not Giovanni, as so sorry.
Mr. Simpson, David.
David would have said, putting it, there is a financial aspect to each subject, and we believe that by highlighting that, then we can really bring that real world implementation of financial literacy home better than just implementing it into HFLE.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And once again, great job to our panel.
You want to just hold there for a second, guys? Just take a pause there, right there. Yeah.
You guys were awesome. And I am learning here as we start to put the agenda for education reform. So I have a quick question for you. There were a couple of options that you presented. One, do you introduce a full syllabus as its own? Two, do you integrate it in another class? HFLE was one of the areas. And my question to you is, if we were to introduce it with its own syllabus, what would you take out that you're currently learning that you do not find meaningful if you were to replace it? That was one question. Because remember, we are trying to avoid curriculum overload. And both the students and the teachers have told us that if you add more, it will overload them. So if you think this is critical, and I agree with you, what would you take out? That's my first question. The second question, so that you can deal with both at the same time, is we have now introduced a new civics curriculum from September of 2022. It goes first form, second form, third form, for class 1, class 2, class 3, class 4, and then it goes form 1, form 2, form 3. So all the way from class 1 to your third form year, you do civics. Is it possible that we can stack the learning so that at the end of class 1 in primary school, you have these learnings, these lessons? At the end of class 2, this, so that by the time you complete third form, you have completed the full syllabus without having added anything to your burden. So those are the two questions. Thank you. And we are learning because we will integrate what you are saying into what we are doing with education reform.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Regarding the syllabus for financial literacy, I'm not sure if it was clear, but when you're integrating it into the other subjects, there would be a syllabus, yes, but it's not going to be its own thing at a time. So this syllabus is going to have a range of topics, for example, budgeting, and you're going to integrate that into the syllabi. For example, I would have mentioned the French project. So, sorry, right, coming up with this syllabus would be an important detail, yeah. Teaching it, I am not sure if I would say that it would be a burden, You were mentioning replacing a subject so that you equal out the workload. What I'm suggesting is that you not replace the subject, rather you change the assignment within that subject. So with the French, yeah. Thank you. So with the French syllabus, I would have mentioned that the original project would have been simply to create a recipe for croissants. But then I changed that, I altered it, added in budgeting, saying that instead of just creating the recipe or researching and finding the recipe, you are actually making the croissant. So it's the same amount of time, but you're making the croissant, and now you're incorporating budgeting. So you're learning that. And then that would also translate into the HFLE class. I'm sure that there are some aspects of HFLE. They have to be where finance comes into play, right? So you're incorporating this. And again, syllabus, you're creating a syllabus, finding ways to incorporate it into the other subjects. That would allow you to teach the syllabus using the other classes syllabus. So equaling out the workload, no need to take out another subject. I will be dangerous, and I will say that if there were a subject that I wanted to take out, it would be HFLE. No, here's the reason. Like my colleague pointed out, and all of you agree, HFLE is seen as a free period. It's almost right, especially first to third time for farm. I would have mentioned to my senior teacher, Mr. Applewhite, that it is only this year that I have actually paid attention in HFLE because this is the only year that I have done anything. And I am fairly sure that many people can agree that that's been the case. In junior school especially, you do not do anything in HFLE. I don't know whether or not it's a matter of the syllabus. I don't know whether or not it's just not taken seriously. But the reality is we're not learning much from it. So there's a lot. We're not speaking about the marks for HFLE. The actual content, there isn't much, I mean, from my experience. But what I would say is that there is a lot to be taught. And I think Emmanuel would have said this. Yes, there's a lot to be taught in HFLE. A problem that may happen, or rather, why I would think that it is not teaching a lot is because of how much it is spread throughout the syllabus. You know, you do it from first term all the way up to sixth. But that then makes me wonder, are we wasting the time? Could that be actually taken from, instead of being first term to sixth, can that be taken from 1 to 3 and get the same amount of information taught? And then the extra space from that syllabus, from that class being taken out from past third form, could that then be used for financial literacy?
Alrighty, thanks a lot, guys. You're gonna have to, because of time, because we have another presenter waiting here. But because of time, I want you guys to write down your responses that you would have for the minister, and we're gonna get them to her after this. Thanks once again. By the way, my recommendation, the only subject to keep is lunch. No. We continue now with our first guest speaker, Professor Janice of Fournillier of Georgia State University. Professor Fournillier is a highly qualified and experienced educator holding a PhD in educational psychology, MA in education, certificate of interdisciplinary qualitative studies, diploma in language arts teaching, and a BA in English and Spanish. She specializes in qualitative research methodologies, cultural studies, teaching and learning practices in non-school and urban contexts.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion of which I'm happy to be a part. And first, I want to thank the conference organizers for inviting me to what I consider to be a very momentous occasion. that we are having a discussion on education for future, and the focus is on the youth. I am very aware that many scholars and educators in the field of economics, politics, history, education, what have you, have written a great deal about the issues related to our Caribbean education system, and specifically the inequities that exist. And I thank them for what they've written and for the knowledge that I've gained from reading what they have written. I bring to this discussion my experience as a Caribbean person who was educated in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago specifically, taught at all levels of the educational system in Trinidad and Tobago, worked with the Caribbean Examination Council, and did research on issues related to our education system, both the school and non-school context. The points I raise here are also informed by the ton of readings and studies that I've had access to, that my colleagues have conducted and written so very, very in-depth and well about. My goal, therefore, is to use that along with my experiences of the stratified system of education, and indeed I believe it is and continues to be stratified, and not necessarily intending to critique the government actions or what they have not done, what they intend to do, their strategic plans or anything of the sort, or to generalize. Instead, my hope is that you will gain an understanding of my perspectives on the inherited stratified system of education and the challenges of the goal of obtaining education for all. Hence my title, Education for All, Myth or Reality. I also want us to think about, are we respecting the rights of the child? And these include those who we have included in the discussion today, which is such a great idea. And are we providing youth with the kind of knowledge, information, and opportunities that they need? I think we should hold all of that in mind as we begin this discussion and reflection on where we are or where we want to go or where we should go or where we would like to go. Ultimately, I believe this talk will create a platform on which the youth specifically can begin to fully participate in the reconceptualization of our education system that desperately needs their voices to be added to the conversation as we reimagine education for the future. At the same time, I want to remind us that if this has to happen, all the studies, all the work, all the strategies, the papers on education need to become part of the knowledge base provided for our youth so that they become partners in the true sense of the word, and they are better able to engage in the discussion on the future of our education.
Education, this is the foundation. Our rising population needs sound education to be recognized anywhere you go. Have your certificate to show, to enjoy any kind of happiness. Knowledge is the key to success. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you gon' catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow idle companions to lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn
You might wonder, why Slinger Francisco, aka the Mighty Sparrow's Calypso on Education, became one of the features of this talk? Well, yes, this composition was created some 55 years ago, during the time some of our countries, for example, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, were gaining political independence and charting the course for our countries. This meant that education needed to be attended to carefully, and it became a major institution that would propel our individual and collective development. However, I'm reminded by my patois-speaking grandmother and mother that plus c'est sa chose, plus c'est sa même chose. The more things change, the more they remain the same. And thus I believe Mighty Sparrow's Calypso, one might say, is still relevant today, as we continue to view education as essential and important to our growth and development, regardless of the era. However, despite all the changes, it seems some things remain the same, and the inequities on which the education system was built seem ever present. The question then becomes, who better to look to for possibilities than the youth, who are the future of our nations? However, I argue, if we are to move the system forward, they need to be aware of the past, and in the Sankofa tradition, go back and fetch to move forward. So yes, we need to hear from our youth what for them are the barriers to inclusivity and equity, although some might argue that some of these youth are the ones who are not experiencing being excluded, and they may not even consider the system inequitable. I then say, what if and when they are the leaders? Would they like to see the situation change? And so, what really is the past that has informed where we are and where we seem to be unable to move from? So let's look at some of our inherited inequalities in the Caribbean education system. So we can start with, it's no secret that pre-emancipation education of the enslaved population was not encouraged, and there were limited opportunities for poor whites. When limited legacies were entrusted to provide education for poor whites, there were minimal opportunities for the enslaved population. As Coates put it so well, prior to emancipation in 1838, the notion of providing education for the African slaves met strong opposition from plantation owners, despite the efforts of many Christian missionaries seeking to provide religious education to convert enslaved Africans to Christianity. Friends, our Caribbean education system, indeed, we have to accept, has its roots in the plantation slave-based society that was characteristic of most of the colonial period. And indeed, if we are honest, in spite of the gains we have made, and indeed what we see still is the presence, especially in our secondary school selection process, of a kind of hierarchy, which does not, allow us to really have that goal of education for all, and quality education. Is it that this in itself is the source of the challenges that we face in terms of fairness and equity? So there has been expansion, but the investment does not seem to have resulted in equalization of opportunity. So there's access and there's opportunities, but what kind of opportunities? And as Miller so rightly put it, notwithstanding the impressive gains as we see in the Caribbean Examination Council that has changed, and the curriculum that has changed, etc., and the expansion in terms of you can get a position, a place, but what kind of place do you get? The goals of equity and equality of opportunity remain distant, for the majority of the Caribbean people, while the barriers of ethnicity, race, and class have been lowered, they have not been removed. And we see that in the work of Delisle and a lot of other scholars who have looked at the SEA and now the previous common entrance and the SEA exams, and have shown that a certain class of students or certain students who attend a certain type of school seem privileged to find spaces in some schools and not others. Others argue that it's not a simple task, but, well, according to Black Stalin, we can make it if we try a little harder. Is it as easy as trying harder, I ask? However, I think we need to give thought to the policies, a lot of the international policies, that in a way have contributed to the gains and some instances the inequities, because they come packaged very nicely, but some of the things in the package we probably didn't bargain for, and we have not realized how they affect the outcomes, and the intended and unintended outcomes are many. So we can start looking at the UNESCO Convention on the Rights of the Child. We could look at Education for All. We could look at the DACA Framework for Action. We could look at, more recently, the Features of Education Initiative. And all of these, in some way, I argue, contribute to what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and the outcomes. So we look at the rights of the child and we say, okay, we hope that in some way the access to the services such as education specifically and healthcare are equitable. So you have access, but what kind of access do you have? Are the rights of the child really being attended to? Or is it just, sugar-coated? Oh yeah, we're taking care of them. And then we have the DACA framework that revisits education for all policy, and it became a reaffirmation of the vision set out in this World Declaration of Education for All a decade ago. And it is true that a lot of our partners, a lot of our Caribbean countries have been participating in this framework and have used it to develop their strategic plans and to rethink to make their visions of for education, and used it. So we are participants in all of this. And even more interesting is the 2015 report, which showed that just 1/3 of countries have achieved all the measurable education for all goals. So it's not as perfect as we think it is. It's still a work in progress. And as we come to the new initiative, the Futures of Education initiative, which I think is even more important and really poignant at this point in time, where the goal is to reimagine how knowledge and learning can shape the future of humanity and the planet. And if we exclude some from that, really accessing all the different types of knowledge and learning, then what are we doing? Where are their rights? And so it's important to know that the initiative incorporates extensive public and expert engagement and aims to catalyze a global debate on how education needs to be rethought in a world of increasing complexity, uncertainty, and fragility. So that's where we are now. But where are we going? And they added, we need a new social contract for education to repair injustices while transforming the future. And I think this is so relevant to the conference, because if we are looking to the future of education for the youth, what will this new social contract look like? Who will be participants in this contractual framework? How are we going to repair the injustices and a lot of the things the unjust things, the inequities that we see in the selection processes? I want to make a case for bringing the students and giving power, allowing that power and student voice to be integral. So we get what the laws are, what the contracts are, we get what the governments do, what the educators do, but where's the student voice? I'm not saying totally have them tell us what to do, but can we put them in the middle? Can we start to look in the middle? Can we see things in the middle? Can we shift the established boundaries that we have created between teacher and student and student, institutional knowledge and student knowledge? And I add to that local knowledge too, right? And so if we are to really go back to this whole contract about, oh, no, we have to do something about the injustices. How do we do that? I want to thank Director Jules for some of his important suggestions for successful reform. And he points to they should be strategic and sustainable, ongoing and thorough, involve stakeholders and create new partnerships for progress. And that's where I come to the point that, can we bring the student voice into the partnership process? Can we make sure that they are there too? But in doing so, are we providing them with the local and global knowledge needed to be able to make the decisions that we would like to hear from them? And so I come back again to my own dear Dr. Leroy Calise, sorry. We can make it. And so I close with the words of our ancestor, Brother C.L.R. James, who in 1980 said, when others doubted, I have never found the West Indians, when called upon in a critical situation, do not respond. That is their life. I believe they can't help responding. Beginning as we do in a new civilization and leaving such elements that might have been brought with them behind, they have always responded to a fundamental and serious challenge. That is our way of life. That is why we are still alive. Thank you.
Sure, if you're still there, do we have any questions for our last presenter? Any questions or comments? Okay, it doesn't appear that way. She gave us a historical view of education and looked at education in terms of fixing injustices. And of course, she ended in terms of partnerships and bringing the student voice into the discussion on education reform and education for the future. Okay, so I don't think we have any questions. So Joel, back to you.
I might have your job, David. It's a little easier than mine. Well, we shift now to another panel segment. Here we will have two interesting topics discussed, those being entrepreneurship and robotics. In the interest of time, I'm going to cut out half of what I'm supposed to say here and let you guys know that our first panelist is a best-selling author and is a chartered accountant, international speaker, and trainer. Speaking on the topic of entrepreneurship, please welcome Donna Every.
Hi, I'm Donna Every. I'm going to take a few minutes to share my thoughts on the importance of entrepreneurship in education for the future. Now, we all know that entrepreneurship drives economic activity, and it's no different for Barbados. So if we really want a thriving economy, we really need to create more entrepreneurs. Now, people might say, can you create entrepreneurs? Are entrepreneurs born? That debate has been going on for many years. Are you born an entrepreneur or can you be made? I recently came across some research that shows that actually entrepreneurship seems to be hereditary. So if your parents were entrepreneurs and your grandparents were entrepreneurs, there's a tendency that you have that entrepreneurial gene and you're more likely to start a business. However, that doesn't mean necessarily that your business will succeed, because research done at Stanford Graduate School of Business, after examining 2.8 million small businesses, they discovered that the more entrepreneurial activity you're exposed to, the greater your chances of success for business. So that means that while you might be born an entrepreneur and have a greater tendency to start a business, that does not necessarily mean your business will succeed unless you're being exposed to more entrepreneurial activity. So that's why we really need to start early, inculcating an entrepreneurial mindset in our children, and we need to start at primary school. I remember when my children were in J3, which is like 9, 10, they had to do a science project. And I think it would be wonderful if, apart from doing a science project, if across the primary schools, they were required to do an entrepreneurial project and run a little business for 6 or 8 weeks, just to start them thinking entrepreneurially. And of course, as you transition into secondary school, we absolutely need to have entrepreneurship in the curriculum from first form. Or even if not from first form, at least from third form. I remember when I was at third form at QC, we had to choose between Latin and home ec. I mean, it'd be great if we had to choose, I don't think still do Latin, but if one of the choices that you had at third form was entrepreneurship. And it really needs to be part of the whole curriculum. I know CXC has introduced a CAPE version on subject on entrepreneurship. I don't know if the CSEC version is coming, maybe in a year or two. But in the meantime, we really need to start our children with entrepreneurial mindset. I remember when I was with the Barbados Entrepreneurship Foundation and we introduced the $20 challenge in schools, it really went beyond our expectations, because we discovered that after the children had gone through the 6 weeks of the challenge, as it was at the time, and they ran businesses successfully, a number of them started to think, well, you know what, I never thought about running a business. I never thought about starting a business or having that as an option as a career. But having done the $20 challenge, they felt that they could run a business, which was exactly what we wanted, to create that entrepreneurial mindset in them. So we can make entrepreneurs. They don't have to be born. What they need is constant exposure to entrepreneurial activity. So one of the things I advocate strongly, I mean, some of these schools may already be doing this, but at Career Day, you really need to have entrepreneurs introduced, as well as the other, usually bring in the accountants, the doctors, the lawyers, the engineers, which is lovely, but I really think we need to have entrepreneurs come in and talking to the students and sharing their experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so that they have a real expectation and understanding of what it means to be an entrepreneur, to start your own business, and to bring solutions to the table for your market. So that is something that I would love to see happen more. And secondly, I think it's really important, if we are serious about entrepreneurship and creating entrepreneurs for the future, that we really need to consider having two streams of schools, because right now a lot of children barely pass 11 plus, they're sent to a school and expected to operate in their academic stream. I think it'd be great if we could create an entrepreneurship, a vocational stream and an academic stream. So even at 11 plus stage, you get to choose which stream you want to go to. And even if you choose, say, the academic stream and you get to full form and you realize, you know what, I really would try to like to do entrepreneurship or something else. And then you can maybe do a transfer at that point. But we really need to start creating an atmosphere and an environment, really, an environment for entrepreneurial mindsets to begin to be formed early, so that by the time they're 18 and they're ready to leave school, they are really well equipped to start a business and then can take advantage of the organizations that are out there like YES and Barbados Youth Business Trust, which are set up to help entrepreneurs at that stage. And the important thing about entrepreneurship is that it really builds self-confidence and self-esteem. So what we want to do, I'd love to see happen, is that not only are they just teaching entrepreneurship and how to run a business, but in their problem solving is included things like time management, things like financial literacy, which is very important, not just for entrepreneurs, for all students. They need to have an understanding of financial literacy. So the bottom line is that we want, at the end of the day, that in our education for the future, is to produce students who are well-rounded, who are confident, who can run successful businesses because they've been exposed to entrepreneurial activity throughout their whole school career, and that therefore they can generate revenue for our nation and help grow our economy so that we all have a better standard of living. So thank you. I look forward to the discussion later.
patois in this region. So it is very diverse linguistically. And so what we realized when we work with social robots is the fact that social robots themselves are not produced in the Caribbean. We know this. And the accents that they use are not Caribbean accents. Okay. They're actually, a mixture of, Asian mainstream English type accents, depending on where they're made, European, and so on. And so one of the things we realize is if we want to work on having people accept social robots in the Caribbean, one of the things we may have to address is this issue of how the robot sounds. And so we wanted to try to figure out how to do this in a cost-effective way, because if we try to create new voice recognition systems for social robots that have Caribbean accents, it could be prohibitively expensive. So we want to figure out, we asked the question, can we just simply use the lexicon, the words that are unique to a Caribbean dialect, without the phonology, the sound or the accent, can that actually influence how people perceive? So one of the things we're going to talk about is basic dialects. Everyone has a dialect. Everyone speaks a dialect regardless of the social, political, or economic position. And there are 5 characteristics of a dialect. We mentioned one just now: the lexicon, which is the vocabulary; the phonology, which is the accent; the grammar, which is how the words are formed; the semantics, which is the meaning of the words; and the pragmatics, which is actually the way the languages are formed. And dialects vary when any of these characteristics vary. What we're going to focus on specifically is the Bajan dialect. Now, the Bajan dialect, the Barbadian dialect, is a Caribbean Creole language. We don't know of its origin, but it can be detected in American English or in Gullah in the Carolinas. And we know it has no standard written form because spelling varies among authors and so on. But we know one of the characteristics of words starting with TH actually are pronounced, with a hard D, duh. So these are some of the characteristics of the Caribbean Creoles and the Bajan dialect. So in terms of what it is, this idea of research into dialects and so on in robotics and human robots, this has been done many times, and people have done this before. So one of the interesting things we wanted to examine, though, is if you have a robot sounding like a Bajan, how do people perceive robots that would sound like a Bajan? Because the research has shown that when a robot sounds like or uses a regional accent, a local accent, as opposed to the standard language, I have the standard accent, whether it's be English, French, or whatever the standard language is, the robot is tend to be perceived more poorly than a robot that speaks with standard English or the formal accent of the language. And so, if we can make a robot sound like a Bajan, would we actually see that kind of perception as well? So what we did, we took some students from the University of the West Indies, the 40 students, 28 males and 12 females. And interestingly, most of them, 60%, had never heard of or interacted with a social robot before our study. We did this online using Zoom because this was done during the pandemic. And this is what the participant in the study would see. They would see the face of the robot, and then they would see instructions on how to have a conversation with the robot. They would also see a full picture of the robot at the bottom of their screen, so they could actually see what a robot looks like. Here's a full picture of the robot. The robot we use, this is a social robot. It's called Zenbo. It's made by Asus. And this robot is used as a storyteller. It's used as a companion robot for the elderly. It's also used in retail as a sales assistant. As I mentioned before, the speech recognition system is mainstream English. Okay, so we also use this robot in other studies, and we know that with the mainstream English, this affects user perception. So we used some survey instruments. I'm not going to go into them, but basically they tested the attitude of people towards robots, and they tested how people, they were used to examine how people felt towards robots, how they perceived these robots. These were the 2 things that we had the participants do. We had them have a conversation with Zenbo, and we had English, and we had a Bajan dialect and the mainstream English version. So a participant would say to Zenbo, "Talk to me." That would start the conversation. So they come and say, "Hey Zenbo, talk to me." And then the robot, depending on the 2 groups, because we split them into 2 groups, if the robot used the Bajan dialect, the robot would respond, "Okay, everything blessed, fam. What's going on with you?" Whereas if the robot was speaking with mainstream English, the robot, after being asked to talk to me, the robot would say, "Okay, what is your name?" Okay, so we had these differences in the way the robot would respond, whether it spoke with a Bajan, using the words are from a Bajan dialect, but with the same sounding voice. So this is the way we conducted the study. Basically, what we did was we split the 40 people into 2 groups. We had one group interact with the robot when the robot used standard English. And then we had another group that interacted with the robot only using the Bajan words for the dialect. And we compared how these people, we did it within subjects. We wanted to see if There was a difference between how they perceived the robot when they had a conversation with the robot versus when they just issued commands to the robot. That's a within subject study. And then we did a between subject study to see if the people who interacted with the robot when it used standard English had any differences in their perception or attitudes towards the robot when the robot spoke with a used Bayesian words. And so we had some interesting results. I'll just skip to the results to keep time is short. Don't need all of that. These are the things that was interesting for us. That when the robot, for the Bayesian dialect group, the number of interactions, that is, when the person spoke to the robot using the conversation, when they had a conversation with the robot, and then they gave commands to the robot, right? So when they had a conversation with the robot using Bayesian words, and then the next interaction was they just issued commands to the robot, and the robot responded using the standard English language. The people who were in the Bayesian dialect group perceived the robot as less competent than those who interacted with the robot using standard English. Okay, so there was some kind of interaction where they interacted with the robot with the Bayesian dialect, somehow or the other, they saw it as less competent. And one of the other things was that even though they saw it as less competent, they were more comfortable with the robot that spoke with the Bayesian dialect group. So those who were in the Bayesian dialect group, they were still more comfortable than those who had more discomfort in the English dialect group, right? But when we look at the two groups together, when we look to see if the people in the Bayesian group had a more negative, more positive perception than those in the English group, we found that there was no difference across the groups. So that was itself interesting in that between the two groups, they saw the robot the same way, but within the Bayesian group, there seemed to be some kind of negative perception or there was a reduction in the perception of competence. And so overall, this was an interesting finding. We saw that there were some, while the words themselves had no effect on perception of the robot competence, it seemed as if the interaction with the robot itself seemed to have some kind of effect. And so we see that there may be something there in terms of how we can get the robot to sound like a Bayesian by just using Bayesian words. Now, there are limitations to the study, that would affect some of the strengths of the conclusions, but these are the things that we would be able to address in the future work as we continue to investigate whether we could make our robots sound like Bayesians to increase acceptance and to have them be used by us in the Caribbean. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I look forward to them.
Okay, so we are here again, end of another presentation. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments? Robotics, entrepreneurship. All of our presentations are crystal clear then. I think we have one question coming. Thank you. See questions, sir?
That's okay, cool. I kind of have a question regarding entrepreneurship. However, I'm not sure if anyone from this section of the ministry can answer or resolve it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. In this ever-evolving world, careers in social media, such as social media marketing and social media management are becoming more prevalent and are therefore career opportunities for new entrepreneurs, and also skills that entrepreneurs need to learn if they want to promote and grow their business in this technological age. My question is, I know on the news about a month or so ago, the issue of the fact that Barbados is region locked for earning revenue on YouTube. When or what is the plan of action to resolve that? And in schools, will there ever be a course that looks to help with social media marketing and the new evolutions of marketing as we progress in this technical age?
I'm not.
Morning, everybody. I know it's been a long morning, so you have a good stretch. I'm not with the ministry, so I can't answer that. But I really do advocate that if we are going to be having entrepreneurship in the secondary schools, those kind of things are built in. Because we can't just do business in Barbados. We have a globe, and Zoom and various things are out there for us to access. So we really need to, David, maybe you go back to the Ministry of Education to share some of these thoughts. As the professor said earlier, it's important for your voices to be heard. So I just want to ask you all here, how many people are thinking about starting their own business right here now? Okay, that's a small percentage. And I want to know, I just want to advise you, and I commend the ones who want to start a business, but remember, what's happening now globally, especially in our region, is that job opportunities are a lot less. So I want you to be thinking, even if you're wanting to be a whatever, doctor or the usual traditional subjects, how can you be entrepreneurial in that? Because we really need to begin to earn money through entrepreneurship to promote the growth of our economies. So the ones who want to start a business, wonderful. The ones who have not thought about it, I want you to start to think about it, because the whole thing is changing. Everything is changing, so I want you to be thinking differently. Okay. Any other questions? And also the thing about having as a different subject, as you said, there's a lot going on, but integrating it into your subject. So if you have math, I don't want you to be just thinking, oh, I'm doing quadratic equations or simultaneous equations, but I want to be able to see how you can use that in the business when you come to do your costing and various things. So all those things, I think, as we talk about educational reform and so on, how do we integrate everything into the different subjects that we're doing now? Okay, anybody else? Any other questions? I know you're hungry and tired, so thank you all for your attention, and thank you for having us.
On the comment about being region locked in terms of YouTube, I know that Jamaica recently got past that hurdle, and they have an abundance of YouTubers. And also in terms of access to Amazon's marketplace, Jamaica got past that hurdle earlier this year, I think. In terms of persons being able to sell freely and so on and have their products. So that's a question I would have to answer the ministry in terms of what are the required steps to have the region unlocked in terms of YouTube broadcasts and so on. It may more be from the YouTube side than from our side, but I can explore that and get an answer back to those who are interested. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, thank you once again. So Joel, back to you.
Thank you very much. Quick question for you guys. Don't answer it out loud though. What is the first Bajan word you want to teach to a robot? Don't say it out loud. Anyways, we're going to take a quick break here, guys. A 10-minute break at that. So I'll see you guys back here at 12:06 p.m. And we're going to get the ball rolling again right after that.
Education, education, this is the foundation. Our rising population needs sound education. to be recognized anywhere you go. Have your certificate to show, to enjoy any kind of happiness. Knowledge is the key to success. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you won't catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow idle companions to lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn today. For employment, yes, employment, you must be intelligent. It's essential, very essential to have your credentials. But if you're block-headed like a mule, no one will employ a fool. You'll be the last one to be hired and the first one to be fired. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you're gonna catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't follow idle companions or you will get burned. To earn, you got to learn. Illiteracy is man's greatest enemy. It's your duty, yes, your duty, stamp it out completely. Ignorance always impedes progress. Education saves you much distress. So learn as much as you can. For the nation's future's in your hand. Children stay in school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you're gonna catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow idle companions to lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn today.
For employment, yes, employment, you must be intelligent. It's essential, very essential to have your credentials. But if you're block-headed like a mule, no one will employ a fool. You'll be the last one to be hired and the first one to be fired. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you're gonna catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow idle companions to lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn today. It's a treasure, yes, a treasure beyond any measure. Just secure it, don't ever ignore it. To fight life's battles come what may. Education lights up your way. Without it, you'll never get through. Success or failure now is up to you. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you're gonna catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow idle companions to lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn. can continue our program.
Education, education, this is the foundation. Our rising population needs sound education to be recognized anywhere you go. Have your certificate to show, to enjoy any kind of happiness. Knowledge is the key to success. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you won't catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow idle companions to lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn today. For employment, yes, employment, you must be intelligent. It's essential, very essential to have your credentials. But if you're block-headed like a mule, no one will employ a fool. You'll be the last one to be hired and the first one to be fired. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you're gonna catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't follow idle companions or you will get burned. To earn, you got to learn. Illiteracy is man's greatest enemy. It's your duty, yes, your duty, stamp it out completely. Ignorance always impedes progress. Education saves you much distress. So learn as much as you can. For the nation's future's in your hand. Children stay in school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you're gonna catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow idle companions to lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn today. It's a treasure, yes, a treasure beyond any measure. Just secure it, don't ever ignore it. To fight life's battles come what may. Education lights up your way. Without it, you'll never get through. Success or failure now is up to you. Children go to school and learn.
Don't worry, guys, you can keep eating. We get ready now for our second guest speaker, our keynote speaker today, Professor Cardinal Warde. Barbadian-born Dr. Cardinal Warde attended both the Boys Foundation technical papers and 3 textbook chapters in these areas. Dr. Warde is also active in encouraging Caribbean youth to pursue careers in science and engineering. In this role, he serves as the president of the Caribbean Diaspora for Science, Technology, and Innovation, and as the interim executive director of the Caribbean Science Foundation. Both of these organizations are focused on stimulating science and engineering-based entrepreneurship and assisting with the implementation of STEM education reform initiatives to promote more science and technology for economic development of the Caribbean. He has served on the U.S. National Service, the Science Foundation, the Board of Trustees of the Stevens Institute of Technology, and as a scientific advisor to the governments of Barbados and Belize. Please put your hands together and welcome Dr. Cardinal Warde.
Good morning to all my HC, QC colleagues and friends in the Barbados and in the diaspora, any part of the world. I want to say a special thank you to Mary Simmons for inviting me to deliver this keynote address. As you can see, the title of my talk is Preparing the Barbados Workforce of the Future, STEM Education Reform. When we speak of the future, we have to be very careful because we really don't know what the future holds. We have no idea what the impact technology will have on the way we live, work, and play 20 years from now, and even worse, 50 years from now. So what do we know? We know that the world 50 years from now, 20 years from now, is going to be influenced a lot by technology. And we know that technology is developed based on research. We have 3 ways of doing research. We've got experimentation, we've got computer simulation, and we have theoretical investigations where at the minimum you just need a pencil and a paper. So how can we prepare our students for the workforce of the future? Well, we prepare our students for the workforce of the future based on what we know today. And we know that research governs the evolution of technology, and STEM education in particular is what we're looking at in terms of the education for our students to be ready for the workforce of the future. So what we should be doing then is basically teaching our students the fundamentals of STEM, because those never change, even though times change. And they will become researchers. They will push the envelope for discovery, and therefore they will have a part of the future. That basically summarizes where I'm going today, and I will talk about the means of getting there, which is through STEM education reform. So let us jump right in. I'll start by asking some basic questions. What does the future look 20 years to 50 years from now? What does it look like? Where does Barbados want to be 20 to 50 years from now? Those are 2 different questions. And ideally, where should Barbados be 20 to 50 years from now? The answer to the last 2 questions is really what we're going to be talking about today. And that is, what should we be teaching our students to be ready 20 to 50 years from now? So if you look at Barbados, and for that matter, most of the Caribbean countries, I've listed here 6 challenges that face us: food security and food safety, non-communicable diseases, energy production and consumption, transportation, inside our countries and between our countries, money movement, big problem, and financial education, fintech, and the idea of investing to make returns, not so much happening in the region. And of course, one of the biggies, geohazards and climate change. We all know about the hurricanes and the earthquakes and the sea level rises in the region. So those are our problems. And if you want to know more about those problems and what we might be doing to tackle them, there's a website here on the bottom. It says caribbeanscience.org/CSO. CSO stands for Caribbean STEM Olympiads. So let me put a plug in for the Caribbean STEM Olympiads. There are a set of competitions that are going to be running from January 19th to January 22nd, 2023, next year. And the application forms are due on the 15th of December. So we are inviting our students in the region. There are 3 different levels, starting at age 12 all the way up to age 21. To enter these competitions, you can win money, prizes, and so on. But one of the competitions is a computer coding game using a variety of different languages at different levels. But the games are aimed at solving any one of these 6 problems that I have here on the screen. So we're looking for innovation, we're looking for thinking outside the box, and bring your best to the Caribbean STEM Olympiads. Let me move on. So back to some difficult questions. Not that the first 3 weren't difficult, but these are perhaps even more difficult. Will Barbados have the political will and the financial capacity to solve the current challenges I just mentioned on the previous slide? And can they do so in the next 10 years in order to maintain its current standard of living? Big question. But even more challenging, in the longer term, is Barbados going to be able to make the educational and infrastructure investments needed to create the highly skilled workforce by 2050? Much longer horizon. That's what we would need to do to catch up or compete with the developed world, to create lots of jobs, lots of high-paying jobs, increase our standard of living, and it would be a total game changer if we can do this. So the question, repeating the question, what should we be teaching our students today to accomplish these goals? A lot of people have been thinking about this. I'm not the first one. And at MIT, the institution where I work, it's my day job that pays. People there, like people around the world, think that man and machine will be working closely together in the near future. And there's a quotation here from one of my colleagues at MIT, Darren Asimoglu. And you can read it for yourself, but it says a lot of historical evidence shows that the process of adjusting to transformative technologies is painful. And at the same time, you're capable of technologically and socially creating many new jobs that will take people to new horizons in terms of productivity and freedom from the hardest types of manual labor. And indeed, that's what technology often does for us. It's going to be painful. That's what is being said here. And some of the pain is going to come from the fact that we're going to be using AI software and all the social issues associated with the use of AI. But when man and machine come together, a lot of interesting things happen, all the way from displacement of jobs at the lower levels. But at the same time, we need innovation to make those machines even better. Anyway, I'll leave that alone. Pause for you to think about it. and move on. So here's the model that I've been pushing for many years for economic diversification for the Caribbean. It all begins with STEM education reform, which is what we're talking about today. Innovation, of course, is going to be important. So whatever the education system does, it has to lead to science and engineering-based innovation. That innovation can lead to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship can lead to new companies, especially new technology companies, which can lead to exports. That will allow us to bring in the foreign exchange needed to improve our standard of living. And of course, it would lead us to the economic growth and diversification that we've already talked about. We need to keep tourism, it's very important, and we need to keep financial services to the extent that those markets are still active. So, in a nutshell, here's a possible approach for Barbados. We should continue to invest in tourism and seize all opportunities to revitalize the financial service industry. And that industry is not a sure bet right now. But the approach that I'm proposing is a private sector driven approach, might be ignited by the government and should be ignited by the government in this case. Unfortunately, the government will have to borrow because the money is not there to invest in development of an innovative technology ecosystem with lofty goals 20 years from now. I mean, China often talks of planning for 50 years, but here in Barbados, let's say it's 20 years. And the planning of this technology ecosystem should be rooted in STEM education and technology entrepreneurship. There are lots of things the government will have to do to ignite this process. I'm not going to go into all of them, but in a nutshell, the government needs to find a way to create mechanisms to make it easier to get access to capital. And the government needs to continue to remove the legislative roadblocks and enact civil service reform that will make doing business in Barbados less painful. Don't want to go down that route anymore. We all know what the government should be doing, but let's get back to our thesis. We want to create more jobs because we're not talking about education just for the sake of education. We're talking about technology education here to change the landscape in Barbados and the Caribbean in a significant way. And one way to develop new jobs, technology jobs in particular, is a model here which I call the S-BIRD model, small business, innovation, research, and development. This model was copied from the United States SBIR program. The D is not there. A program that I participated in many, many years ago and built companies using funding from that program, and eventually sold one of the businesses to a Japanese company. So I'm living proof that this model can work, and we can make it work in Barbados with a modified model. But the model starts out with the government, down on the bottom here, providing seed funds to some startup companies or early stage companies. At the phase one level, I put some numbers in here, $100,000, but you can change the number if you like. And those companies would have written proposals, fairly short proposals, maybe 20 pages long, in search of funds. These proposals are written to the government, they're evaluated by experts, and decisions are made, funding decisions are made. There's a down selection to go to phase two, where the government might put additional money into a phase two company after feasibility has been established at phase one. And here the proposal looks more like a business plan. But the idea is that these companies can go on and access global markets and bring in foreign exchange. Some of the phase one companies may decide not to go to the government. They might go outside and bring in venture capital money or angel money or both, or corporate capital, and they can go all the way to production and global markets. And of course, those that got phase two from the government could do the same thing. The idea here in this model, which is different from the US model, is that the government would take an equity stake in some of these phase two companies. I don't think they should do it in phase one, but in the phase two companies. And at some point, the government should sell its equity when the company is successful and plow the money back in, and that's where the feedback loop here is, into phase twos. So if this model works and is managed well, taxpayers would no longer have to put money into phase ones. The returns on these investments could make this thing self-sustainable over the long term, and that would be a tremendous success here. So this is one of the models I'm proposing, but it has to be planned and managed properly in order to be successful. So the STEM-based ecosystem would have to begin with curriculum reform. STEM education curriculum, let me use the word redesign, because really we have to redesign the STEM curriculum, not just in Barbados, but for the region. And that has to be followed up with STEM teacher training. STEM teacher training, you know, is very, very important because one teacher can train lots of students. You get a huge return on your investment if you put a lot of your effort here. And the government should start recruiting lots of technology companies to Barbados. We are good at recruiting financial services companies. We have to learn how to get technology companies to come here. And the question is, why should they even come? What is it that we have to offer? Sun, sand, and sea is not enough. It hasn't worked. We've had sun, sand, and sea for a long time, and the companies aren't here. So a different recipe is needed. They will come because we may have students well-trained in technology, a workforce that they can use. That's what will attract them here more than anything else. And of course, they would love to have very low wages as well. And there we have a problem because our wages in Barbados in the region are not the lowest, they're probably the highest. And places like India and other places have, and some of the other Caribbean countries have much lower wages than we do. But if we are the high end of the spectrum, where we're contributing with our human workforce at the very top levels, they will pay the salaries. And that's what we've got to do. And of course, the model has to, whatever we do, the model has to spin off lots of technology companies so that Barbados is replete with all kinds of new technology companies 20 years from now. I'm using the 20-year horizon because that's basically a generation these days. The big question is, what should we teach? Well, I have a long list here. It's got math, physics, chemistry, molecular biology. This is the year of, or the century of biology. Biochemistry is in there, computer programming, computer science. I distinguish between programming and computer science. Computer science is highly mathematical discipline with lots of algorithms being developed and being used to make computation faster, cleaner, better. And program is what most of us do right now, at least in high school. We don't have too much computer science going on right now, but electronics and robotics are in there, environmental science. And of course, we have to teach entrepreneurship because we're talking about students starting companies and young adults starting companies, and we have to talk about financial technology and so on. So this list is familiar to you, but the question is, what's in the syllabus? Because the syllabus is key. The devil is in the details of what you teach here. And the curriculum reform means looking at these disciplines and making sure that we are current and that we are competitive with the rest of the world. I don't have time to go into the details of each of these, so I'll move on from there. But what should be taught are fundamentals in all these disciplines. The fundamentals do not change. Time changes. Technology is going to change because the fundamentals are going to be used in innovative ways to build new products and services that will change technology, that will change the world 20 years from now. So what do we have to do in addition to teaching the fundamentals? We have to teach design, product design, service design, in order to affect the applications, because the applications are often what you sell to the rest of the world in order to bring in that foreign exchange. This has to be done in the schools. That's where the process starts. And in terms of what we teach, problem solving approaches. That really is the overriding direction in which we must go, finding innovative solutions, not just any solution. Normally, if you're a designer, the first solution you come up with is probably not very good. And after about 5 or 6 iterations, it gets better and better and better. And that's what we have to encourage our students to do, to look at designs of services and products that they make and ask themselves the hard questions. And the teacher should be asking the hard questions. Can you make it smaller? Can you make it lighter? Can you make it less expensive? Can you make it more efficient? And you keep going back to the drawing board. So plug in again the Caribbean Science Foundation and the Caribbean Science, well, Olympiads. That's what CSO stands for, Caribbean STEM Olympiads. We should, again, go here if you have a chance, and you can see that we have some of these disciplines, not all, and we're challenging our youngsters in the region to be innovative in these areas. So how should we teach? We got to discourage rote learning. Rote learning gets us nowhere. A lot of this goes on all throughout the Caribbean and the United States and in China. This is a big problem for education. We have to stop teaching in silos. Our students learn one discipline, or they learn one piece of science within a certain discipline. They go to another discipline, they learn another piece of science and technology and so on, and they're never connected. So whenever they see the first item, they think of that discipline. They see the second item, they think of the second discipline. That's no good. The homework problems, the quizzes, should cut across all dimensions of technology. Because as innovators, we take basic information from many disciplines and we put them together to create new things that may not belong to any of those disciplines in general. And so this interconnectedness is really, really important to help stimulate the innovative process. Grades. I love grades because I believe that they're best used to inform teachers and inform students. Informs the teachers of how effective they are and informs the students of how well they're doing. Grades should be the means, not the end. The grades are not the most important thing. What's more important is how much the student learns and how well they can think critically and analytically. And I reward critical and analytical thinking when I teach over getting correct answers. I want to see the details of how they arrive at the answers. And the same thinking is going to go into the Caribbean STEM Olympiads if you get a chance to go to the website and see what's going on there. Lots of hands-on laboratory training and learning. Very, very important. A lot of people learn by doing. And while theory is nice, and a lot of people can learn with just theory without much laboratory experience, but the laboratory experience really cements in the topics and the fundamentals for most of us. I'm not going to go over this slide, but this slide shows the approaches that are commonly used today for teaching STEM. Problem-based learning, solving problems. I can't overemphasize that. And using inquiry-based science education methods. Basically, the kind of stuff I talked about already. But forming teams and working in teams. Teamwork is so important. All big projects were not done by one person. They were done by teams. And having discussion within the teams and going around this loop that I show here. Hopefully you'll have these slides. You can study this loop. But you have to go around a loop like this sometimes many times where you define the problem, you identify the problem or challenge, you come up with a solution, the solution is not good enough, you go back and you revisit it again a second time. That's what we as scientists and engineers do in the innovation process in order to get a product that people will purchase and people might want. It is not luck. It requires a lot of training, a lot of patience, a lot of dedication, a lot of innovative thinking. So here's how we can create lots of jobs. We have a lot of people who go abroad, myself included, and we go into the diaspora and we become scientists and engineers all the way from bachelor's to PhDs and beyond. And we would like some of these people to come back home and start companies. We should be encouraging that. And if they do start companies, others from the diaspora can come back and work in those companies. It's this line over here. And the idea here is that you go work in a company, you don't like what's going on, or they don't listen to your ideas. You have new ideas. The company isn't able to exploit your new ideas. You go off and start a company. And then you hire people and they leave you and start companies. Well, we can do it in two ways, not just our people coming back to start companies, but as I said earlier, we can attract foreign companies to come down to the Caribbean and Barbados here in particular. And our people abroad can come work at these companies and leave and start companies. The idea is down at the bottom here, we can spin off lots of companies, lots of technology companies. We have 100% employment in Barbados if we could do this within the next 20 years. A lot of this is discussed in this paper I have here down on the bottom. It's on the Caribbean Science Foundation website. Under publications, it's the first article there. And I encourage you, if you have a chance, to go there and take a look at it. And finally, one might ask, well, what is the Caribbean Science Foundation doing to help? As you have figured out by now, I wear two hats. MIT pays my salary. Caribbean Science Foundation does not. I am co-executive director of the Caribbean Science Foundation. And we've been around since 2010. And we have a whole bunch of education and entrepreneurial programs aimed at solving exactly the problem that I'm talking about today, economic development for the region. Our flagship program is SPICE, Student Program for Innovation in Science and Engineering, SPICE with an S. Students for this program come from Belize in the west, all the way through the Caribbean to Guyana in the south. And it's a boot camp. They spend 5 weeks with us, and they take all kinds of STEM subjects, but they all want to go to their dream university in the world. And right now there are about 14 of them at MIT. 3 or 4 have already graduated. There are 3 at Harvard, and 3 have gone to Stanford, and Columbia has about 5, and there are several in the UK. But these are some of our brightest students in the region. And we've asked them to come back to the region and give back. The same diagram I just showed you in the previous slide. In Barbados, we've been doing the Barbados Junior Robotics Camp. We've stopped for the last 2 or 3 years because of the pandemic, but we're going to resume in 2013 in the summer. Computer coding workshops are going on right now. This serves all of the English-speaking Caribbean countries. The next offering of these is February 4th, I believe, and it runs for 14 weeks, 14 Saturday mornings. We have Python and we have website development. Caribbean STEM Olympiads, I already have been publicizing this today twice, so you should go take a look at that. And in the past, we've done teacher training workshops with the Caribbean Academy of Sciences in about 6 or 7 different Caribbean countries. And CariVenture is our hope and goal to help stimulate technology development by making funding available for Caribbean, young Caribbean companies. But anyway, this brings us to the end of my presentation. And so those of you who have been able to listen to me today, hopefully you can cogitate on what I've said and do anything you can in your power to help Barbados implement a powerful workforce in the future, so that the next 20 years, we look very different than we do today, and that we have advanced significantly. The standard of living has gone up, and we are competitive on the global markets with all of the products that we'll develop and sell. Thank you very much.
pay more to do subjects like literature or visual arts when we want to do courses such as that? And if we want to bring more technology companies into Barbados, wouldn't that be placing a strain on our environment by the resources that might be exhausted and also by the biofuels that might be burned? Well, not really biofuels, but the fuels that might be burned, would that be causing more strain on our air and causing pollution?
Dr. Ward, are you still there?
You hear me? The, 'cause I could not hear the question. I heard the speaker, but it was muffled. I didn't have a clear signal. I can hear you, yes.
You are advocating what happens to the arts and other areas.
Oh, it's a,
To respond to that. Sorry.
yeah, that's an excellent question. I am never one to propose that a person should be educated only in STEM. The institution that I come from and that I'm at currently,
Much for your questions and your participation. And I hand back to our MC.
All right, guys. So, in the interest of time, moving along very quickly, I will talk very quickly as well. So, we started off with Harrison College, and we end off now with Queen's College. Well done, guys. I appreciate that. Yes. So, their research presentation today will focus on society, the economy, and education. Please welcome students Kayla Smith, Keon Sobers, Alexia Daniels, and Christina Wharton.
Mr. Moderator, Dame Billy Miller, patron of the Give Back QC Fund and former government minister, Principal Dr. Brown, members of staff of Queen's College, Principal Miss Wade, members of staff from Harrison College, esteemed colleagues from QC, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Our topic this afternoon is society, the economy, and education. How do we prepare? Now, in an article by the Digital Marketing Institute, produced December 8th, 2018, the author states that education is one of the key drivers of growth, performance, prosperity, and competitiveness in national and global economies. According to Allison Economy 2018, the importance of education lies in the fact that it creates opportunities for persons to acquire knowledge and skills. The success of an individual greatly depends on their level of education and the ability to practically apply what they have learned in school. You may be asking, how is this relevant to society? The economy and society are interlinked, interlocked, and interdependent on each other. Economic growth automatically reflects the growth of society as a whole. Hence, society, the economy, and education have a direct correlation. For instance, a substandard education system produces a workforce that contributes less to the financial well-being of society. Hence, our education system must be up to par.
This is why, Barbados, we have a problem. We still live in a society where some children at the primary school level do not obtain a solid foundation in reading and writing. These students then enter and leave secondary institutions without these basic skills, and in some cases, they aren't even allowed the opportunity to sit CSEC exams, which are the stepping stone in advancing to the next level. In a Nation News article posted on September 5th, 2022, the registrar and CEO of the Caribbean Examinations Council, Dr. Wayne Wesley, stated that a great number of students are leaving the education system without certification. We must take into consideration that these people are our future leaders and will replace the present generation of the labor force. Therefore, investment in education at the primary level is just as, if not even more important than investment at the secondary level.
In order to produce well-rounded ideal Caribbean persons, as you can see on our poster hung up in our very own hall, our education system needs to reflect what we want these persons to contribute to society. It must not only be seen at select schools, but across the board. Educational institutions should prioritize 21st century skills such as critical thinking, creativity, innovation, technological skills, digital literacy, and civic literacy. The development and progress of mankind can be directly attributed to innovators who have driven human society forward. In an article produced by Forbes on November 19, 2018, Robin Schulman posits several ways in which educators can make the classroom innovative. Some strategies include inviting entrepreneurs and innovators to the classroom, allowing students to ask open-minded questions, carrying out self-reflection, applying theoretical work to real life, and using problem finding instead of purely problem-solving objectives. Implementing these strategies within the classroom can raise awareness about major challenges to society, such as global warming, environmental protection, and economic development.
But wait, there's another problem. With the commencement of the fourth industrial revolution in the 21st century, society has seen changes in the development of technology, such as the innovation of artificial intelligence, robotics, and 3D printing. These are rapidly changing the way in which humans create, exchange, and distribute value. The digital age is here and it will shape everything that we do. So how do we prepare for this massive shift? Well, we have already had a sneak peek of things we need to do to prepare with the experience of the COVID-19 pandemic, which saw the implementation of digital classrooms as its solution. Online learning has become the most effective tool in maintaining access to learning for the past 2 years, not only at secondary level, but facilitated at higher institutions. Hence, digital literacy will be critical as digital learning is the next step to be taken in the future of education. Society will need to try its best to help children adapt to new learning atmosphere in a world. An article by Schools and Academy Show Community suggests that schools will need to determine a digital methodology and effectively communicate it to all those involved. Schools could begin offering blended learning, a mix of online and in person, as standard even after the pandemic subsides. Challenges faced during the pandemic, such as inaccessibility to technology or high-speed broadband, must also be rectified. A great solution to this problem would be to implement digital libraries at schools and in other areas around the country. These libraries should contain computers with a special database that contains digital copies of texts found in the regular library. Additionally, the database should allow access to textbooks and articles locked behind paywalls.
Having said what was said, what would we like to see from education in the future? our Deputy Head Girl, Kayla, has said that she wants to see education focus on innovators rather than workers. The education system of the future not only needs to focus on the theoretical aspects of fields of study such as chemistry and math, but a shift needs to be made in the direction of hands on learning. Life skills such as financial and technological literacy, as we heard this morning, should be prioritized, as well as the movement towards increased use of technology, as stated. The present educational curriculum already implements aspects of hands on learning where students work in labs and workshops. However, this scope can be broadened by implementing a co op system. When students enter secondary school and progress to third form, they are asked with they are tasked with choosing electives that would be beneficial to their future careers. However, the subjects that they are obligated to choose are subjects that they have never done before, therefore placing them in a position where they have to streamline themselves onto a particular path without understanding that field of study or knowing if they like it. This process is quite unaccommodating because more often than not, these students have no idea of the field of study that they want to enter. And if they do, they end up changing their minds in the near future. This is why a 6-week co op system where students intern with a professional in the field of study in which they have an interest would be important, as it would help the students to make better informed decisions, having a better understanding of how that specific industry works and whether or not they would like to continue on that path before they are tasked with choosing electives.
In addition to the co-op system, there should be a hands-on aspect of every subject that students may study. For instance, instead of teaching solely music theory at school, a practical aspect should be introduced where the students learn to play the music that they write. This process helps students learn how to apply the knowledge that they have acquired, which helps when they enter the workforce as it encourages efficiency in terms of critical thinking and problem solving. Furthermore, there is a general understanding that some students learn at a slower rate than others, and that sometimes there's a lack of understanding of the traditional aspects like science and technology. Therefore, in order to accommodate these students, our education system must pay more attention to implementing educational institutions similar to that of the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute of Technology, which focuses on trade skills. This avoids the potential ostracization of these students and it encourages entrepreneurship in fields such as carpentry, auto mechanics, cosmetology, and appliance repair. Finally, we're in the 21st century, and it is only fitting that we try to increase the use of technology in schools. All schools should be outfitted with working internet, and the economy needs to be elevated to a position where it would be able to provide school issue laptops or tablets, which are programmed with digital textbooks for the next generation.
How are we going to improve education while we're in a state of financial insecurity? Due to the economic insecurity as it stands in Barbados, some segments of society are still feeling the financial pressure. Public schools across the country are dealing with budget cuts that have forced them to make difficult decisions in recent years. When pressure from performance-based assessments is added to the mix, finding funding to uphold a certain teaching standard becomes an even greater challenge. This, along with an increase in the demand for technology within the classroom, will be an exorbitant cost. So we already know that, so we know that this has been already established, but a potential method to improve education is financial literacy. Financial literacy is important not only because it provides a foundation for informed financial decision making, but because financial responsibility is increasing. Financial literacy cannot predict or remedy a crisis, but will play a pivotal role in the economic recovery of our country. When students take financial education classes, they learn the basis of budgeting, saving, and debt management. The education provides a strong foundation they can build on as adults and helps them to avoid lifelong money problems, which allows them to set themselves on a pathway towards success. This will lead to the economic recovery of our country as people will be able to contribute a greater deal to the economy rather than having to compensate for debt. When one understands finance, there is a better understanding of the economy, how it works, and the choice for the leaders in Barbados. Another strategy to improve the education system is the implementation of development programs in school to initiate new methods of income, such as entrepreneurship, cosmetology, robotics, and creation of new agricultural products.
Our country's three main economic drivers are tourism, the international business sector, and foreign direct investment. We can improve education by limiting reliance on tourism while beginning to export goods that will be in high demand. This will require innovators to look for resources we possess that will be of benefit to society. Now is the ideal time to invest in innovation. Demand is low, competition is high, and businesses need to find ways to stand out from the crowd. This can be done by investing in new products, services, or processes. This may seem like a risk, but it can pay off when the economy recovers. Therefore, our island needs more innovators when relating to the business aspect. This means constantly coming up with new ideas and products that keep customers engaged and returning for more. It is also important to be flexible and adaptable to change with the times. Incremental product innovations push export propensity, whereas completely new products have no immediate effect on exporting. Another way of improving financial security is to construct an institution of higher education. If Barbados creates its own university with a wide variety of disciplines such as robotics and coding, gaming, cybersecurity, and digital marketing, then some of our students will be less likely to go overseas to study, and that would decrease our expenditure on scholarships. Additionally, students tend to go overseas to find opportunities that they don't have access to in the Caribbean. Therefore, if we create those opportunities through investment in academia, then our students are less likely to emigrate, and it will not be necessary for the country to outsource labor in order to fill these job descriptions. A larger workforce in specialized occupations would therefore cause an increase in gross domestic product. The avenue is also open for educational tourism, as students from different countries will be inclined to study their degree of choice in an island paradise if offered. The tuition fees charged at this institution could go toward the development of the country.
On another note, the previously suggested implementations of technological and civic literacy, together with trade skills to the curriculum, will not only positively affect the economy, but the society as a whole. Education in technological literacy makes it easier for persons to function in society as we use a variety of digital interfaces to communicate and problem solve. Everything from vending machines to custom and immigration forms are becoming digitized. With that being said, if one lacks a general understanding of technology, tasks as simple as paying bills may become difficult. Likewise, civic literacy is also important to the well being of the society. More civically literate citizens are able to identify the political issues that are most important to them. Also, civically literate leaders would be aware of how to materialize positive political changes. Understanding the laws of a country and your human rights would make it more difficult for persons to be taken advantage of in the workplace or in business. Individuals would also be able to make more informed decisions when it comes to electing a government which could better improve the society and economy. Finally, as stated before, implementing trade skills in the education system encourages entrepreneurship. This accelerates economic growth as the creation of new products and services stimulate new employment, and by extension, increases the amount of income tax collected by the government. This increases the amount of money circulating within the economy, which in turn expedites the development of the country in terms of the maintenance of infrastructure, the construction and repair of roads, and most importantly, the investment in education.
In conclusion, investing for the adjustment of the educational system through the integration of technology, experiential learning, and deviations from the traditional subject matters are direct acquisitions into the future of our society and economy. It creates citizens that are equipped with a unique set of skills and allows them to think outside of the box in order to apply knowledge and function in this ever changing society. Thank you.
All right, we will be answering questions. So
Another another very good presentation by our students, this time from QC, on the interconnection of education with society and our economy. Any questions or comments for this panel? Yes, please come. They don't have that.
Good afternoon, everyone. So it was mentioned earlier the problem with having too many subjects or overbearing students' curriculum. So what is your opinion on grouping schools, having schools that are specific for certain subject areas in the arts, technology, etc.?
That is a brilliant question. Any comments from?
okay, I was told to answer this question. So I believe that is a really good idea though, because in the past, QC was a science school. There were certain schools that were known for the subject areas that they were best in. So I don't see why there should be a problem with schools that are designated for certain aspects or fields of study. So that's my answer.
And I think that feeds into the ministry's concept of centers of excellence. So there's probably some merit there. I am sure it requires wider consultation though, because historically we have been tied to going to a particular school like QC or HC for various reasons. But if we talk about centers of excellence now, we're excluding which school, but looking at what the particular institution offers. So there's room for more discussion on that point. Any more questions or comment? Okay, so we've had some good questions all morning. Any closing comments from the panel?
No, please.
Okay, thank you very, very much once again.
Well, guys, that brings us to the end of today. Quick story before we go. My very first day at Queen's College, I got garbage duty for talking in the hall. And yeah, garbage duty was a thing. Once again, I hope that you actually, anybody learn anything today? All right, well done, well done. It was not a waste of your time, your energy, or your attention. It's been wonderful, guys, being here again. And I was going to say get home safely, but I don't think we're going to get home. So yeah, get back to wherever you guys going safely. Until whenever, yeah. Bye-bye.
Education, education, this is the foundation. Our rising population needs sound education to be recognized anywhere you go. Have your certificate to show, to enjoy any kind of happiness. is the key to success. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you won't catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't allow idle companions to lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn today. For employment, yes, employment, you must be intelligent. It's essential, very essential to have your credentials. But if you're block-headed like a mule, no one will employ a fool. You'll be the last one to be hired, to be fired. Children go to school and learn well. Otherwise, later on in life, you gon' catch real hell. Without an education in your head, your whole life will be pure misery. You're better off dead. For there is simply no room in this whole wide world for an uneducated little boy or girl. Don't follow idle companions or you will get burned. To earn, you got to learn. Illiteracy is man's greatest enemy. It's your duty, yes, your duty, stamp it out completely. Ignorance always impedes progress. Education saves you much distress. So learn as much as you can. For the nation's future's in your to lead you astray. To earn tomorrow, you got to learn.